and a recording of the meeting will also be available afterwards. I'm not expecting a fire alarm test today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the officers out of the building and gather in the cathedral grounds. Members, before we move on to the items of business, I'd like to welcome two members of the public, Amy Greenfield and Mark Jenkins, who have joined us today and are here to ask questions relating to the SEND Education, Health and Care Plan performance item. To make things easier for them, I would suggest that we take the item pertaining to that so that it becomes item 4 on the agenda before the corporate performance. That will enable both members of the public to hear the presentation, which I'm sure will be of interest to them. Members, do you agree with that approach?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Therefore, we will take the SEND as the first substantive issue of business, so it becomes item 4 on your agenda. Right, I move on then to item 1, membership, apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest. We have apologies from Councillor Susan Barker, and Councillor Henry is substituting. And we also have Councillor Lumley, apologies from her, and the co-opted members, Scott Tatum from Health Watch and the Reverend Alan Moss, have also sent their apologies. Are there any other apologies? No, that is the lot.
Councillor Vance is joining us online today.
Oh yes, Councillor Vance is online today. Can you hear us all right, Councillor Vance? Yes, I got a thumbs up. Right, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. To note and approve the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday the 9th of October. Those that were here, are you happy that they are a true and accurate record? Okay, and I will sign them accordingly after the meeting. Right, we move on to item 3, questions from the public. As I said, we have two members today who wish to speak, Amy Greenfield and Mark Jenkins. Can I invite Amy to the front table to ask your questions first? Amy, good morning to you. Amy, you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
My first question is, did a local authority think it's fair for children needing an EHCP needs assessment to have to wait over 12 months since agreed to assess, when in that time children are struggling, not attending school or having to use other resources and services, an example is CAMS, putting a strain and demand on these services, causing more problems, especially for the NHS?
Thank you, Amy. Councillor Ball, would you like to respond to that now?
Chairman, thank you, if I would, and I'll hand over to officers to put detailed in response. But Amy asked, is it fair? And my response to that is no, it's not fair. But I'll hand over to officers to give the detailed response.
Thank you for your question.
Kershaw, are you taking that?
I will do, yeah. Thank you for your question, Amy. No, we're not in any way satisfied with the length of time it's taking for some children to get their education, health and care plan. And this morning we will cover some of the work that we have done to make improvements in that and what further work that we're doing to further improve where we are. We are increasing education psychology capacity. That's something that we did last year and we're continuing to do that this year as well as streamlining the EHC needs assessment process and moving as much as we can in order that we can increase capacity within our SEND operations teams as well. The limiting factor, which you'll hear if you stay for the whole presentation, is education psychology capacity. So we do understand that that potentially is putting strain on other parts of the system as well. We work with schools continually. We have an inclusion partner team as well. So if a school is having difficulty with a child whilst they're waiting for the needs assessment, then we can send the inclusion partner in to provide additional support. And there is also an outreach service that schools can access as well. So we're trying to do an awful lot to mitigate, but obviously one of the things we need to do is catch the system up as well as quickly as we can. So we do recognise at the moment that many families are having to wait, and that's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my second
question, yes.
My second question is, a lot of primary schools are having to use Senkos only 2 or 3 days a week. If the local authority wants to keep more children in mainstream schools, surely this isn't enough time. This is putting extra pressure on teachers who often are not trained in SEN. Senkos are not attending one plan meetings and cannot provide the correct support. Why do all schools not have a full-time Senko as standard? This would surely help the local authority with early interventions, preventing more children needing an EHCP, and children would be better supported for their needs.
Again, Chairman, if I may, can I just agree with the sentiment behind the question, but Claire Kershaw will give the detail.
Thank you. Claire?
So it is for schools to determine how they make their arrangements for the Senko. There isn't a statutory minimum in that regard that the government have set. So I do appreciate sometimes the frustration that they don't have enough time. We do recommend that a Senko should have sufficient time to do all of their responsibilities, and we also strongly advocate that a Senko should be a senior leader at the school as well, in order that they can influence where they go. So in terms of it being part-time or full-time, that is a decision for the school to make. It's not something we would have oversight of. What I can say is that around the school we're also trying to strengthen, so it's not just down to the Senko, it should be the whole teaching staff that are really good at SEND, and not just leave it to the role of the Senko as well. So again, the work that we're doing through training, through our inclusion strategy, and also through the ordinarily available inclusive teaching framework, we're really trying to drive those forward this year, and we've had a lot of success on the inclusion strategy as well. Teachers should be able to adapt their teaching. That is a requirement of the practice, and we are working through teacher training to strengthen the support for children with SEND at the moment. If you are concerned about the level of time that the Senko has, then I really would write into the head teacher, and if you want to submit a formal complaint as well to the school.
Okay, Amy, thank you very much. I move on now to Mark Jenkins. Mark is joining us online. Mark, hopefully you can hear and see us okay. And if that is the case, would you like to make your contribution? You have 3 minutes. Mark.
So, good morning, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today as a school government to raise serious concerns about the lack of transparency and accountability around the council's SEND reform. In July, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to understand how these reforms are being monitored and evaluated, and the response is deeply concerning. Firstly, only 20% of educational health and care is being completed within the 20-week time frame, from 1% last year, but it still means that 7 out of 10 children are waiting longer than law allows. Secondly, the council confirmed more associate educational societies.
Mark, sorry, we're having trouble. You're breaking up, and I don't want you to, lose the message. So I don't know whether it's your end or our end.
I'm not sure, it could just be a connection issue. But one suggestion could be that I think he might have sent them through to Jasmine. So if Mark would be happy, then Jasmine could read on.
Do all members have a copy of?
No, sorry.
No, that's why I want to be fair to Mark, that everybody does hear what he says. Is there anything, Mark, you can do at your end? Or I will, if worst comes to worst, I will read what you have sent in, but I would rather it was you.
Yeah, I can try and turn my video off to see if that makes a difference.
Do try that, please. And start again. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. So I'm here today as Governor in Essex to raise serious concerns about the lack of transparency and accountability around the council's SEND reforms. In July, I submitted an information request to understand how these reforms are being monitored and evaluated. The response I received is deeply concerning. First, 20% of educational care plans are being completed within the 20-week legal time frame.
We really are having a problem here, and members are. Do you mind if I read what you sent? Because I do have a copy of what you sent, and then give you the opportunity just to say that I have faithfully said what you sent in. Would you mind if I did that, Mark?
Yeah, if there's still trouble, that's fine.
It is. You're coming and going, and it's impossible for members to hear. So I'll start members from the beginning. Right. Right, good morning, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today as a school governor in Essex, and I want to raise serious concerns about the lack of transparency and accountability in the Council's SEND reforms. In July this year, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to understand how these reforms are being monitored and evaluated. The response raised some alarming points. Only 29% of EHCPs are being completed within the 20-week legal timeframe. That's up from just 1% last year, but it still means 7 out of 10 children are waiting longer than the law allows. The Council confirmed that although it has increased the use of associate educational psychologists, it has actually lost permanent EPs since June 2024. And for several key reforms, including proposed plan meetings and earlier sharing of educational psychology advice, the Council stated that, quote, "this data is not recorded," close quote. That means ECC has no way of knowing whether these reforms are even being implemented or whether they're improving outcomes for children and families. But I also want to share what it looks like in schools. Head teachers tell me that when the local authority fails to meet the 20-week deadline, it now pays only a nominal compensation amount to schools. A sum so small it doesn't come close to covering the real cost of supporting pupils without an EHCP or top-up funding in place. In some cases, schools are still waiting to confirm whether they've even received backdating funding for those pupils whose plans were delayed for over a year. Schools also report that funding allocations arrive as a single block with no clarity on how much is for each child or how the figures are calculated. This makes it almost impossible to plan provision or account for how resources are being used. And in some cases, the local authority has tried to downgrade funding bands when a child moves between schools. For example, from band 6 in an infant setting to band 4 in juniors, despite no reduction in need. Leaders tell me they have had to battle repeatedly just to secure the same level of support a child already had. All this adds up to a picture of confusion, inconsistency and lost trust, and ultimately it's the children who lose out. So my questions today are, 1, how is the Council monitoring and evaluating its SEND reforms, and will it commit to publishing clear data showing whether these measures are actually being implemented and what difference they're making? 2, given that 7 out of 10 EHCPs are still issued outside the legal 20-week limit, what concrete steps are being taken to ensure Essex meets its statutory duty and delivers lawful, timely support for every child? And 3, what is the plan to rebuild and retain a stable, permanent educational psychology workforce rather than relying indefinitely on temporary associates? Schools across Essex want to work in partnership with the Council, but at the moment everything feels like a battle and the children are the ones paying the price. We all want these reforms to succeed, but that will only happen through honesty, transparency and proper accountability. Mark, have I faithfully read what you were intending to say?
Thank you.
Okay, fine. I will now hand over to Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Jenkins. A lot of these issues are what falls under the operational issues, so I'll ask Ralph Holloway in a second to answer in detail each question that's there. But if I can say, and I'm just on transparency and openness and honesty, I hope the committee, and I know the committee has changed from last time, the colleagues who were on the committee last year will accept that, particularly during the Task and Finish group and other scrutiny committees, that we have been, as a directorate, department and portfolio, as open and honest as is needed and hopefully the committee required. Just a couple of things. Absolutely, and what we did recognise, and I apologised at the time at full council, and I have done on BBC Essex Radio, the 1% performance rate was absolutely unacceptable. But to then move from 1% to 100%, which actually we all need to be realistic, is not achievable, and we've seen that by the country's average of 46%, I think from memory, 40-something percent of completing EHCPs within 20%. So we were never going to get to 100%, and it was going to be a long journey to get to a reasonable mid-table or national average position. The issue we have is EHCPs being introduced by the national legislature, and then the statutory responsibility being handed down to local government. And what we have seen, particularly just before COVID, and certainly during COVID, and that is continuing, the increasing need for EHCPs and needs assessments without the resource and tools we need to meet that statutory target. And I think that is evidenced within the SEND report. We have put in, since March last year, £7 million to try and address this. And we've seen there has been improvements, and I hope again the committee and Ms Jenkins recognise that. But even that, because of the backlogs and so forth, and then further backlogs coming forward, it has made an impact. It may give you the scale, the scale of the challenge ahead. And as for educational psychologists, there is a national shortage. And I think, again, Mr Holloway will explain in detail the issues we have with that. But from my point of view, if I could magic up educational psychologists, I certainly would. Thank you. I'll hand over to Ralph now.
Thank you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to address some of the points that are made before the questions, because I think it's important that some of this is on the record. The point was made that where there are delays in needs assessments, we only pay nominal compensation to schools when the assessment has been completed. We actually pay the full assessed amount of banding that applies to that young person. So we always give the school the funding that young person would attract, and it's backdated. At request of many schools, we're now moving to a proactive system. So from week 20, we will fully fund, so the school has funding in its budget for a young person who's going for the assessment. There was then a point about how schools know how much money has been paid and for which pupils and when they get it. It's done in 12 monthly shares, so it's not done in a block, it's done each month. And schools are able to access through a secure area on the Essex Schools Infolink website exactly how that funding is made up of, so they'll know which young people it applies to. So we need schools to know who the funding is for and which young people it applies to. There's a link to a funding calculator, so schools know exactly who that young person will be. There was then a point about the local authority downgrading funding bands when a child moves between schools. And the example was given of band 6 in an infant setting to band 4. So I asked my team who do the finance for all children with education and healthcare plans to look at what's happened from this last academic year into this year. We've had 59 children move between settings. Of those, 44, so 75% have stayed on the same band. 3 children have seen a reduced band. Of those, one of them never actually started at the new school. And 20% had an increase in their banding. So we've actually got significantly more children who've had an uplift in banding than seen a downgrade in banding. The point about EPs, absolutely. This is something that moves. So a freedom of information request would capture a point in time. But we have now got more educational psychologists at the start of this academic year than we had at the end of the last academic year. We're going through a recruitment drive, and I'll refer to that when I do the specific questions. So the first question was about how the local authority monitors and evaluates its SEND reforms and how transparent are we. I think we're sitting in a committee today, which is one of the ways in which we do that. We report back to you. We have a Send Accountability Board, which is beyond Essex. It includes the Essex Family Forum, it includes schools, health partners, and then within the council it includes social care as well as educational functions. We report directly to Councillor Ball as our portfolio holder. There's a monthly meeting where he interrogates the data. There's a Send Oversight Board, again chaired by Claire as Director of Education, which meets with the Assistant Directors, who are the operationally responsible officers, and again interrogates the data to a granular degree. It looks at every stage of the needs assessment process. I have a monthly meeting with the Department for Education where they ask me about Essex's performance, and we go through what's changed since the last meeting and what factors might have influenced that. My assumption was that they would be bringing to me good practice elsewhere, which Essex would be able to draw upon. I have to say that's been somewhat lacking. And then we have case management system, which would mean that individual managers within quadrants are looking very carefully at performance within the team and individual team members. What we don't do is have a system that record individual tasks within that system. So the point was made about EP reports being sent to family. That's a process, that's not an outcome. So we don't record that. We do, however, make sure regularly through those discussions that what we've agreed to do is being done by each part of the system. The next question was about what are we doing about timescales. A lot of this will come out in the report today, so I'm going to reduce this, but it will be shared as a written response with full detail. The first one is increasing educational psychologist capacity, both through a contract with an external independent company and through an independent and through internal recruitment. Additional Send operations staff to coordinate assessments produced and quality assured our plans. Streamlining processes where we can without sacrificing quality and to ensure that we complete the assessments more effectively and more efficiently. We've moved activity that draws upon Send operations capacity into the customer service centre and business support functions so that we can get our staff fully concentrated and focused on the most important point, which is completing the assessment. We strengthened governance and oversight, and I'd hope that this is part of that. And with the health element of the education needs assessment process, there are obviously challenges around that at the moment with the changes to the health structure. We have invested significant funding into the Send operations team and to wider elements of the Send system as well. And then finally, I think this is the most difficult element. What have we done to plan, rebuild and retain a stable, permanent educational psychology workforce rather than just relying indefinitely on temporary associates? We've got a permanent recruitment campaign which is live. We want Essex to be a really attractive place for educational psychologists to work. One of the best ways in which we can do that is to recruit from the most ready available workforce, and that's EP trainees who have had placements with us. Trainees have to work for 3 years post-qualification within the regulated system, within local authorities, before they can move to work independently, privately. So we see that route as a really good way of encouraging EPs to come and work for Essex County Council. And that's been a successful process for us so far. We're also developing a route around assistant educational psychologists. So these are graduate psychologists who work for Essex and have been, we successfully recruited 9 of those starting from September. First, that is to support qualified EPs in statutory work, so it frees up EPs to focus on needs assessments and intervention and early intervention work that they do. And secondly, to help them achieve a place on the doctorate EP training programme, so nationally we have more people who are becoming trained EPs who can be part of our workforce. How do we get more EPs to work more of their time with Essex County Council? That is the biggest challenge. 39% of the current workforce are part-time. One of the main reasons for that is there is a very strong and healthy independent EP market. And it pays very well. So we are competing with the independent market where people can get paid at a significantly higher rate than they would do for Essex County Council. That is not something that's unique to Essex, that's something that applies nationally as well. And it's something we would hope to see addressed within the national Send reforms.
Thank you very much. Can I thank both Wendy and Mark for their questions and contributions, and to Councillor Ball and his colleagues for the responses to that. Thank you very much indeed. Right, colleagues, we will move on then to our first substantive item of business, which is now, with the change in the agenda, to our SEND Education, Health and Care Plan performance. Members, this item is for us to receive a report on the performance of the issuing of EHCP in accordance with the recommendation from full council, and the SEND Task and Finish Group report, which was finalised earlier this year. Councillor Ball, are you leading the introduction to this?
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, I'll do a brief introduction and then hand over to officers.
By all means.
To take us through. Thank you. So, thank you for inviting us back in order to update on the work and performance in the SEND space. Hopefully you would have seen and read the paper, and that is an extensive and no stone unturned update. Recognising we've continued to make progress, but we as a council also need to recognise that, like other parts of the country, we're facing ongoing challenges, and that is important to be open about, and which has been set out in the report. And one thing I never want to lose sight of is that behind every statistic is a child or young person with a family who deeply care about them and their education. And we've heard from one today, and I know there's two others in the audience. We know there is more to do so that every family feels the benefits of the changes, and we are trying to improve communication and rebuild trust with families. We know we have a long way to go, but we're determined to get there. And this was something I was speaking about with the parents last Monday at the SEND Sanctuary event outside County Hall, which the parents here today were at, which was a national awareness raising event of the challenges parents are facing in the SEND system. Before I hand over to officers, I just want to note that we as a council also need to be realistic, that progress won't be linear and can't always be quantified, but progress will continue so that every family will hopefully feel the benefit of the changes we are making. Just an aside, Chairman, could I just express my disappointment in this committee that the Education White Paper that we were expecting this month, which we were hoping would benefit families as well as obviously help us get through this adversarial system, has now been postponed till next year, which is disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Kershaw, Claire.
Okay. Obviously, we appreciate you've read the report. We thought it might just be helpful to go through a very small number of slides just to bring the report to life, and to give a smooth segue into your questions this morning. So just a bit of context and performance overview. What we've tried to do is show you the year-on-year progress that's being made, and give you an insight into some of the changes that we've made for this academic year as well. I don't need to go through the challenges within the SEND system. They've been well rehearsed both here at the committee and through the Task and Finish group as well. The challenges there are really around the increase in need. You'll see that from 2016, there's been a 104% increase in the number of children with an education, health and care plan in Essex. So we have risen from just over 7,500 children in 2016 with an EHCP to now just under 15,500 children with an EHCP. That obviously requires every child to go through the needs assessment process, for every child to go through an education psychology assessment, and for every child to have a plan produced. But I think it's important to note that every child that has an education, health, care plan then has an annual review of their education, health and care plan. They have statutory points of transition in their education that we need to oversee, and they may well move school and have changes in their needs as well. So there's a significant increase in the volume of work as a result of those children and those needs. These are real needs. I do want to stress these are children with needs that need their education, health and care plans, but that's part of the challenge within the system. Since 2015-16, we have also seen a 178% increase in the request for assessments coming through, and it is that figure that has caused the delay and created the backlog in the system. We simply do not have enough education psychology capacity to move those needs assessments through within the 20-week statutory timescales, which is where the challenge is. We have a backlog, we had a backlog, and we continue to receive about 220 requests to assess, which enter the Essex system every single month. So as much as we're trying to clear the backlog, we are adding 220 further assessments into the system every month, and that's causing part of the challenge. We absolutely do not accept the performance. We absolutely need to continue to make the improvements. In 23-24, 6% of education, health and care plans were issued within the 20-week statutory timeline. For all those that were issued outside, the average completion time was 46 weeks. That position did improve by the end of 24-25. However, still it is the minority of plans being issued in the statutory timeframe, but we did issue 27% of plans within the statutory timeframe, as well as clearing as many of the needs assessments that were sitting in the backlog. So the original backlog that we had when we started the academic year of 1,300 needs assessments, they were cleared. We did have 1,300 education psychology assessments that were undertaken during the 24-25 academic year, and we issued 1,911 EHCPs during that year. But of course, with over 200 coming in every month, that is still happening at the same time. So performance continues to be a challenge. What I will say, and Ralph has highlighted some of this in terms of the oversight, we absolutely monitor now what happens within the 20-week statutory timelines. We've shared some of this through the task and finish group, but there are 3 stages to an education, health and care plan assessment. The first stage is when we receive the request to assess. We have 6 weeks to review and evaluate the evidence that comes through for a request to undertake a needs assessment, and we have 6 weeks to review that evidence. We meet that timescale. We review all of the needs assessments that come in. Within the 6 weeks, we decide whether we will take that needs assessment forward for an assessment or not. We then have 10 weeks to undertake the education psychologist advice and gather the health advice as well, and to really do the bulk of the work around the assessment. We then have 4 weeks to finalise the plan, agree with the family the details of the plan, and to issue the plan. We are also compliant in that 4-week part of the end part of the 20-week statutory timelines. The bit we are not compliant is around the EP assessment, the psychological advice, because of the wait for an EP to be allocated to that needs assessment. So it is the 10-week bit of the 20 weeks where we are unable to complete the needs assessment within the 20 weeks. So that is the degree of granularity that we are assessing month by month what is happening in the system. If you could move to the next slide for me, please. So what are we doing? So last academic year, as people will know, we commissioned an external EP agency to deliver 900 assessments. I can confirm that they did deliver those 900 assessments. However, it did take them some time to mobilise. Even they struggled to recruit the EPs that they needed to deliver the Essex contract. So we had many more assessments coming through from the agency from March 25 onwards to July 25 when the contract ended. And I'll say a bit more about that because that links into what we're doing this year. Well, I'll link the two. As a result of many more education psychologists being working on the Essex contract at the end of 24-25, we commissioned the agency at the higher volume of assessments. So we commissioned 900 last year, and for this year we've commissioned 1,900 assessments. Of course, linking the questions up every time we commission agency, private EPs, we are sometimes driving EPs into the private sector, and that's the challenge with retaining our own substantive workforce in that regard. Some of this has already been said, but in order that schools were not financially disadvantaged by the delays, we backdated the funding to the point of week 20. We have had the oversight across the system. We have increased SEND operations staff, we've streamlined, and as Ralph has said, we have moved work out into business support and into customer service centre as well. We also commissioned activities for families during the summer break. We are increasing communications for families. We absolutely understand, and from feedback directly from families, we have a lot more work to do around communication, and we will be addressing that. And during the academic year, all told, there was an additional investment of 4.2 million. As I said, this year we have commissioned the agency for 1,900 assessments, and we have a recruitment strategy which Ralph has outlined in terms of the assistant EP model, traineeships, and the associate EP pool as well, which is a hybrid pool of associates of private and working for Essex as well. This term, we are also piloting a new model of the EP assessment, so I'll be able to say a bit more about that when we're next in front of the committee, and that's to, again, with the time of our own substantive EPs, provide more assessments within the capacity that we have as well. It has also been agreed by the Essex School Forum that we have developed a best fit funding model. So we will now fund schools to the point of the 20 weeks rather than backdate. So schools now won't be waiting for the funding that comes with the Education, Health and Care Plan to put the additional support in for the children and meeting the needs of the children. There will be a best fit model where an average banding allocation will be paid to schools at the point of week 20. We're currently working, or Ralph's team is currently working, on ensuring that we catch up all plans in the system that are delayed. So every plan that's currently delayed, schools will get the funding for all of those children they're waiting for the EHCP this side of this term, and then obviously all new children entering the system, the school will get the funding at the point of week 20. We're also in discussions and piloting AI solutions around the Education, Health and Care Plan. So we move some of the administrative work away from individuals and use AI to enhance and support the work of our SEND operations teams as well. And again, we're hoping to have an AI solution coming in to the system through the spring term and into the summer term. And as I said, there's more to do around communications to families. So we are looking at that as we speak and how we can further improve communication to families. And overall for this year, 2.8 million. I should say there's been other tranches of funding since the 25th, since 2021 after the increase in requests for assessment started to be felt, but we just thought it would be helpful to track last academic year and this academic year. If you can move on to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. I think it's also important for the committee to understand that we are trying to work on every part of the SEND system. So whilst the priority is very much around the needs assessments and ensuring that we complete more needs assessments within the 20-week timescale so that families and schools are not waiting for their children's EHCP, we are also looking to improve every other part of the SEND system at the same time. So another big tranche of our work, which again we have shared previously, is our work around the inclusion strategy. Mainstream inclusion is a priority of the government. It is also now an area where Ofsted will inspect around how inclusive mainstream schools are. We've had an inclusion strategy in Essex now in place for 4 years. That has evolved and iterated from pilot to full strategy, and we continue to adapt and add into the strategy following feedback from what schools feel would be great in terms of support. So we have available to schools an inclusion framework offer, so schools can bid for small projects to improve how they can better support the needs of children. So areas include things like introducing forest schools, introducing sensory spaces, training for staff, as well as really looking at how they can work innovatively. A lot of outdoor learning models have been funded through the inclusion framework. We are continuing to prioritise that support to schools, and I'm pleased to say we've now had over 180 school-led projects who have had an inclusion framework bid approved. By February half term, so February 26 half term, we will have completed 170 inclusion reviews across the Essex education system as well. And there'll be a lot of learning that we can share around the outcome of those inclusion reviews. We've also just completed, as part of the Council's transformation programme, a further tranche of work within the transformation programme. We had Newton Europe come in and support us through a fully in-depth diagnostic review of everything that we were looking at. And so we are continuing to refine and improve how we work. And we took a paper to the Transformation Oversight Board, and we're pleased to say that they have approved an additional £1.3 million worth of investment in order that we can continue to transform the SEND system. And we'll particularly be looking at improving processes around early years through primary, secondary and into post-16. We are continuing to ensure we have as many specialist provisions as we can, as specialist places that we are able to provide through the sufficiency plan and the capital programme. So we have delivered 760 new school places, either delivered or underway across the Essex system. We have opened 4 new special schools in Essex. We are planning a 5th new special school, and we've increased resource mainstream provisions by 179 places, and we are continuing to work with schools on innovative solutions as to how they can provide more specialist provision. We've got some really innovative models that have been delivered. Obviously, partnership working is at the heart and how we engage, and we've had some really supportive feedback about how we are working with schools to give them as much support as we can. And we continue to run the SEND roadshows, and as I said, communication with families is a key priority for us. And we are continuing to do this within the financial challenge that we have. So colleagues may or may not know that the SEND system is funded through the Dedicated Schools Grant and the High Needs block of the Dedicated Schools Grant. Many local authorities are in significant deficit within their High Needs block. We were able to delay the deficit position, but we are now in a deficit position in respect of the High Needs block, and we are expecting government response through the reforms around that. So we did end the 25-26 just under £31 million in deficit. Just by way of context, the budget is over £220 million. It does say there, if we do nothing, the forecast, if all the trajectories remain the same, to go up to 428 million. However, coming back to the inclusion strategy, we now have case studies where we have seen that we have got real life examples where schools would have put in for an education, health and care plan. We would have agreed to assess, and they've got children in their schools that historically would have had a plan, that they feel they can better meet their needs, that do not have a plan. Therefore, we haven't needed to invest the time and money to process the plan, nor do those children require the top-up funding because their needs can be met in the mainstream schools through the inclusion strategy. So we're not in a do-nothing position. However, we are working on that as a forecast model as well. We are continuing through the high needs block to invest in early intervention despite the financial pressures, because the only way we will stem the increases that are coming through is if we continue to invest in early intervention and prevention in the system as well. I hope that's a helpful overview of where we are.
Thank you very much. I'll open it now to members of the committee who may have any questions or comments. Who would like to open first? Councillor Stamp, then Councillor McCrory.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. As it's been said, we've been on this committee. I've been on this committee for 5 years now, and whilst I can see the significant changes recently, the past 2 or 3 years, definitely, would it be fair to say that as a council we maybe should have identified the risks and invested sooner? Because I do feel we maybe haven't been as fast to respond to the special educational needs children that was brought to the council a few years ago. It's not a criticism, it's an observation, and I did say, would it be fair for me to say that? I was speaking to a lady as I was walking around a field on Sunday in Southminster, and she said, everything's a battle, Wendy. Doesn't matter what and she represents a group, and she said, everything's a battle, Wendy, at every stage of the process. Why am I always having to fight for something? Now, I did actually ask her if she would kindly put that into an email, but obviously she hasn't had time. But I just wondered if you can address that from your point of view. Do you feel, when you're dealing with parents, that it is a battle? Do you think you're managing to cope with I understand it's diverse. Every child has different needs. I really, really do understand that. But do you feel as though you are now you're more aware of what the issues are? And I'll just give you one small example. One of the ladies said to me, she has a high-functioning child that attends one of the schools. Not just the ones, she said, 'cause some like the forest schools and they're brilliant. They like to go out and they do the play and they learn. But the concern she gave to me was her child was very high functioning, but the person who was allocated to deal with the child didn't necessarily recognise the high functioning level. So the child then shuts off with the person who is trying to look after the child or what they're supposed to address. So I just wondered if there's anything in place in the training, when you train people to work with the children, that they can recognise high functioning. Because let's be honest, these people are like the Microsoft, what's his name? Gentleman. Those sorts of people are future entrepreneurs. Yeah, it has been recognised that high functioning children with special needs grow up to be our next generation of people who invent things for us to go forward. And I do think sometimes that maybe isn't addressed. So I could go on, but I won't, because I know how much hard work you do, and I'm very grateful, and I can certainly see over the period of time how much work we have put in. But I do feel that the council, whether it was financial decisions that were taken that was beyond your control, wasn't given to address the issues that have now become a major problem for our future generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Ball?
Chairman, if I may begin and then obviously pass on to Ralph and Claire. Absolutely, as I mentioned, and I have mentioned previously about the adversarial system, the broken system that we have. It's been recognised not only by me, but members of Parliament nationally of all political persuasions, and the system and the Ombudsman. Remember, I did an Ombudsman report, and actually system failure, where there is no fault to the council, but the fault on the system, is recognised by the Ombudsman. Which is why I was disappointed that the white paper, which we're hoping would have seen some improvements and some reforms to address this, has been postponed. It is fair to say. I think, as I mentioned, the needs requests, and can I just say, of course, there are a lot more needs requests than actually needs requests agreed, which again has to be taken into consideration. The increase in that, as I said, just before COVID, then we had COVID. It's not an excuse; it's just a reality. Was there an expectation that would then return to normal afterwards? Perhaps there was. I think I'll say that. I hope you'll understand. But I think it is a fair comment. And just about. Again, the different stages of where there is this issue. Absolutely, parents, rightly so, want to be there for their child. And the correspondence I see, and I do see quite a lot, I see all of them, but obviously those that do write to me or go through the members of Parliament, it is around the request for needs assessment, then obviously the application of the EP, as Claire and Ralph have headed out, and then about what is actually in the EHCP and parental expectation of what they want to see in it, of what A is practically available. Could well be a special school place is what is needed, but if there isn't one available, then what do you do? It's only a tribunal can then insist that a special school takes that place. I know Ralph and his team do great work in between, in a lot of cases, to try and mitigate that and find solutions. I'd also say, and this is where, and I'll take criticism, I will take criticism, but I think it's the right thing to do. An independent placement is, on average, double the cost of one in the local authority, and I need to be mindful of that, particularly if there is a local authority send school that can meet need. The parent, and I understand the parent might think, no, I want that independent school, but we need to be aware of the double the cost that can induce. I'll pass on to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And obviously, we do acknowledge that at the moment parents do have great difficulty at this moment in time. I think what I would say in answer to your question is we were taken aback by the increase following COVID, if I'm honest with you. The numbers increased considerably, and we were so in it that we just tried to get on top of it as much as we could. We did secure some one-off funding through the COVID monies that came through at that time to increase our send operations capacity. But that was one-off money and it was time limited in that regard. So we were constantly where we were. Did we think the trajectory would slow down and the increase slow down? Yes, that was the assumption we were working under. It did not. So yes, it is fair that we weren't tracking the system at that time as closely as we should have done. At the same time, we were losing EP capacity from our substantive workforce. So it was the combination of both. Could we have intervened earlier? I'm absolutely sure we could have done. Yes. We were trying to just deal with it, to be honest with you, as much as we could. So it's not great that it got as bad as it did. Absolutely, I acknowledge that, and never would I want any of my service performance to be as it was where we were back in 2024 when the backlog had exceeded capacity in that regard. We are making progress now, but if I could have intervened a couple of years ago, yes, we wouldn't be where we are now, Wendy. So I have got to say that's a fair point, absolutely. But we were working on the assumption the trajectory was likely to plateau, and it did not in that regard. In respect of how we support, what I will say is the inclusion strategy, though, is something we were ahead of the game on. We are ahead of the game on. So we were trying to do that bit of the system, whilst the other bit of the system was causing us a huge amount of challenge and issue in the system. We don't talk too much about the operational side of things, but the way we undertake I'll send improvement work is the operational needs assessment work happens within our 4 quadrant teams, and the improvement and innovation work happens within the Centre Strategy and Innovation team, which Ralph heads up. So Catherine is here as one of my 4 assistant directors of the mid team. Catherine is also our assistant director lead for the inclusion strategy as well, if you want to learn more about that. We do have a strategy lead for autism, so I'm going to hand over to Ralph to talk a little bit about what we do in that space around training needs for children with autism. We have a strategy lead for speech language communication. We have a strategy lead for psychology as well. So we are really looking to put in place a strategic training and support approach with those strategy leads supporting the work of the quadrant teams as well in that regard. So maybe Ralph, if you can say a bit more about that, please.
So I think we were ahead of the curve on some things, Wendy, but some of those things take time to impact. So when we restructured in the year in which COVID hit, we did introduce new roles that led strategically on particular areas of SEN. So as Claire said, autism, speech and language, social, emotional and mental health needs. And what they do is they work with our mainstream schools in terms of developing training for those schools, because I think the biggest factor influencing how parents, children, young people experience the system is their experience in their local school. And so we need to have more of our schools delivering great SEN provision for all families. So we're working on that, and the inclusion framework, inclusion strategy is another part of that. I think we were ahead of the curve on special school capacity. That might sound counterintuitive given the pressures on those, but some of that was delivered by the Department for Education. So there were frustrations about the speed with which buildings went up, but we have opened 4 new special schools in Essex in the last 3 years. I'm not sure I know another authority that's had that much new capacity, and we've expanded and rebuilt some of our special schools as well. We would have been in a much more challenging position if our special schools hadn't been so flexible in terms of the range of need they meet as well. So some of our schools that were predominantly, or if not exclusively, for children with moderate learning difficulties, now support children with a wider and higher range of need as well. And our mainstream schools have stepped up, and we've got lots more new resource provision in mainstream schools to support children who maybe in the past would have been in the special school but are now taught in their local community. So I think if you look at the 20-week assessment, it's a metric that you can measure success by. It's not the only measure of success. Do I think it's a battle for some parents? Undoubtedly it is, and that experience for them, I completely recognise is not a good one. There will be other parents who would say that it hasn't been a battle, and it's that inconsistency, I think, which is the biggest issue.
Could I just actually ask the question?
Very quick, because I've got a list of questions, yes.
I do want the answer. I did actually ask the question, Chair. Who do I need to speak to about the opportunities for high-performing students?
Oh, yes.
I think that's a really important question.
That would start with school identification.
Who do I contact is the best thing. If you can come to me after, I can then let the parents know,
Sure.
And then it can be spread within a group, because there's more than one high-performing functioning child, you know what I mean. Thank you.
So our strategic lead for autism would be the person that we would direct to work with a group of schools if there was a need for training.
Tom, is that on this item?
I'd like to make an observation about school culture, if I may, in terms of the commitment to a culture of inclusion within schools.
Right, I'll put you on the list then.
Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Because I've got a batting list here as I saw the hands go up. So I've got Councillor McCrory, Councillor Plale, Councillor Loxton, Councillor Henry and Tom Cohen. Right, off you go. Councillor McCrory.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. There's an awful lot of information there, which is difficult to absorb at a meeting like this. If I may say so, it would have been helpful if we could have had that a day or so before the meeting, so we could actually have a chance to properly interrogate some of that data. However, I've got a few points of detail and some general points from the covering report. So in 6.1, I think it's page 45 on our agenda, you talk about the 900 additional EP assessments. So in that second sentence, you talk about virtual assessments with by the liquid personnel and face-to-face assessments by ECC. So is that because it's a two-stage process, or they're just two separate processes? Why is one virtual and ours is face-to-face? Can't we have face-to-face? And what's behind that?
So the explanation behind that, Councillor McCrory, is obviously the liquid personnel are a national agency. So they recruit EPs all over the country. So there will be EPs undertaking virtual assessments. There's no difference in the quality of the assessment. It's a single assessment. So no, it's not a two-tier assessment. It's a single assessment, but there could be an assessment of a child by a liquid agency EP anywhere in the country. So that's why they're virtual. When we agree to assess, we do determine whether we agree that the assessment could be done virtually or whether it's a more complex child and it needs to be face-to-face. Obviously, the Essex workforce are based in Essex and can travel to those children. If a parent doesn't want a virtual assessment, then we will move that to face-to-face. They do have the right to say no, but obviously the capacity that we have in the system is through the agency and not through our workforce in terms of the limited capacity moving forward. But we have seen no change to the quality. We quality assure the liquid assessments. We quality assure the people working on the Essex contract. So our deputy principal education psychologists in each quadrant quality assure the quality of the assessment and advice coming through from the agency EPs. So we have full quality control of what's happening. It is purely where the EP lives and purely how they therefore can assess.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to paragraph 7.3, EP retention strategy. You talk about assistant EPs and associate EPs to increase the workforce availability. What's the difference between assistants and associates? And
I appreciate the complexity of the language in respect of everything, and it might be helpful maybe if we provide a briefing paper on the different types of how education psychology is delivered. So Essex County Council has two teams of education psychologists. So if I start there, we have our own substantive education psychologists, and then we have what's called associate psychologists. The difference between the two is our substantive EPs are obviously on full Essex County Council terms and conditions. They get their training with us, they get their registration with us as well, and all the requirements that they need to sustain and maintain their registration. They have their union representation through us as well, and they undertake a mixture of statutory work, early intervention work, and research work as well. I think it's fair to say that it takes 7 years to become an education psychology. They don't particularly want to spend all their time on statutory assessments, so it's a mixture. So our own substantive workforce do get the mixture of those three parts of the process. We then have an associate workforce, which we've had for many years, that mainly, if you think about them as sort of our own private capacity, but they do work for Essex. They do benefit from some of the Essex benefits, such as the training. So they only work on statutory work, and they're sort of a hybrid workforce. So they are contracted to Essex, but predominantly part-time. A lot of them do private work as well. They do get some benefits of being contracted to Essex and affiliated with Essex, but technically they are a sort of a quasi private workforce. So they don't do anything but statutory work. So the only non-statutory work is delivered by our own substantive EPs in that regard. The assistant EP workforce is the new bit of the system. So we've only introduced that from this September. And that is, we have recruited psychology graduates. So these are not educational psychologists. They haven't gone through the full training. So in order that we can mitigate the gap that we have in education psychology support, particularly the early intervention work that our substantive EPs undertake in schools and with families, or providing some training, etc., etc. We've now, because of the deficit in EPs nationally, thought creatively. This has come from another local authority where they've done this, brought in graduate psychologists to increase the amount of psychological advice and support we can give to schools and families, but it's not that of an education psychologist. They will work alongside an education psychologist, they will be supported by an education psychologist, but it is a way of getting additional psychology capacity into the system with the national shortage of EPs. So that's the new bit that we've done this September.
So we can be assured that the quality is what is required, and we're not sort of trying to do it,
No.
if I dare say it, on the cheap, as it were.
We are not, no. And obviously they can't provide the EP advice within an EHCP. That has to be an EP. So they won't be doing that. Our strategy lead for psychology and our principal education psychologist has developed, in partnership with Catherine, a really, really in-depth induction programme for those starters in January, and they have worked their way through that induction programme. It is something new that we are trialling. We do hope they will go on to maybe go through their EP training as well. So it's another way of potentially getting people to train as education psychologists. But no, our principal education psychologist is monitoring those new people all the way through.
Okay, thank you. So we're talking an awful lot about how you deal with this. I'm interested in trying to find out what is the cause of all this. You've talked about COVID, but it's still continuing. So 9.1, last bullet point, talks about the work by the Institute of Public Policy Research. And they've sort of suggested there that there's unmet needs due to reductions in early intervention. Are we, I'm sure you're, as professionals and your professional bodies, is doing a huge amount of work into trying to get to the bottom of what is causing this. Is it that the children, when they have early years provision or nursery provision, they're not getting the sort of education that they need? Or, I mean, what's your feeling about what is causing this? Because 250% increase is quite extraordinary. And there's got to be a reason for this. And that needs to be addressed at the root cause, doesn't it?
So I'll hand over to Ralph. There isn't a single reason, Councillor McCrory. It's very, very complex. We've had increases in diagnosis, particularly around neurodiversity, increases in children diagnosed with autism and ADHD. There are obviously medical advances, which mean that we have children with medical complications that historically and traditionally may not have survived to school age, that are surviving to school age, and therefore we need to provide an education for them. There were many gaps that were caused by the lockdowns, particularly early years children in terms of speech language communication delays as well. So there are multiple reasons for what is happening, but Ralph, please do add to that.
Claire's going to pass over to me after she said most of what I was going to say. I think the simple point is there is no one single answer to this. There are children who have identified special educational needs who would have those needs regardless of COVID, and we are seeing more children with severe learning difficulties. That's not a COVID factor. That's just something that we're seeing. And have I got an explanation for it? I've not seen an explanation that really satisfies me. I'm not going to buy into any conspiracy theory about it being related to vaccines or anything like that. It's been something that's been really prevalent over the last few years. If I walk into particularly a primary school, I see more young people with special educational needs with severe learning difficulties than we were seeing 5-10 years ago. And schools, I'm sure Tom would say the same thing, that it's just a growth in numbers. What we do know is that at the earliest stages, and this was something that we've worked hard to address, are we always identifying the type of special educational need we're talking about? So are we identifying speech and language needs in our early years settings as effectively as we want to? We've done a lot of work to address that. Sometimes it was wrapped up in a kind of catch-all phrase of moderate learning difficulties, or even identified as social and emotional mental health needs, rather than getting to the root cause of why the young person was struggling in that setting. So a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the work that schools do is about making sure at the earliest stage that young person's needs are identified, because there needn't necessarily be, for some children, a long-term need for an education healthcare plan, whereas for others there definitely will be.
Chairman, might just give a view on, because of course pre-EHCPs read statements, and rightly or wrongly, there was a little bit of a stigma around statements, if I may say so. I think on a positive note, since the EHCPs have been introduced, there's greater awareness, more parental rights within there, which parents have become aware, rightly so, as a positive. And along with what Ralph and Claire have just said as reasons, but just a view of how, in my layman's view, that I've seen the increase, along with what Ralph and Claire have said.
It just concerns me that are the children not getting what they need at an early age, and the parents think because they're behind, we've got to go for an EHCP.
I think there'll be some circumstances in which parental confidence in a mainstream offer will mean they'll request an education healthcare plan. I completely understand that. There will also be maybe a point at which we get to transition to secondary schools where parents might think about the physical environment of a mainstream school compared to the physical environment in a primary school, and that might be another spike where we get requests for assessment. And again, completely understand why that would be the case. So there's a lot of the increase in numbers is because we've just got more children with special educational needs. It's not a deficit in the system, it's just a growing population. But there are elements that are impacted upon by environment. If you gave me a blank cheque, you'd retrofit every mainstream school in Essex to be completely 21st century, meet the needs of a different population than we had 20 years ago.
Thank you. 2 points, Chairman, if I may.
Quickly, if you will, please, Councillor.
Well, it's a very important subject, Chairman. You haven't said anything about appeals. I know the national figure is well over 90% are successful. What's the situation in Essex? And do we still use QCs and KCs to defend the council's position against a poor single parent who's fighting against the system?
So 83% of parental appeals are resolved before a hearing, and that is very much the way in which we want to work within the tribunal team. It's focused on finding a resolution with the parent, and that would be recorded as a defeat for the local authority. For me, if we've got to a position where the parent is happy with what we've agreed, then that's a victory for both sides, because the parent gets the place or the provision they need. It might be that it's a special school place, but we're delaying entry because there's no capacity at that point in time. There will be other cases that do go to a hearing. We don't employ a team of lawyers within the tribunal team. We are a team that's mostly made up of SEND caseworkers. It's led by an experienced SEND operations lead, and they are focused on working with the parent and then working with the operational quadrant to find a solution without the need to sit before a judge and let the judge make the decision. When we get to hearing, it's definitely not a 99% win-loss situation. It's much closer than that, but sitting in front of a judge isn't the way to resolve things. If we can possibly do it before, that's the best solution.
Okay. Just lastly, Chairman, under the programme for RAC schools, I hope we will take the advantage by incorporating in the design for those rebuilds to have these SEND facilities that are so lacking if we want to encourage these children to be educated in mainstream schools. So I hope that and I've got a vested interest in this, so I hope that opportunity is not missed. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory. Councillor Pale.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the panel for their updates. The panel might be aware I'm a school SEND governor, so I do sort of see this at the coalface, and I think we've already mentioned the adversarial nature that there is between the school, the parent and the local authority, and I think it's also fair to say that there's unfortunately this current system pits local authority against local authority when it comes to EPs. So I guess the first question I have is, Mr. Holloway said that we have currently the highest level of, or we have a higher level of EPs this academic year than we did last year. Is that the highest figure overall, or has that?
We've definitely not got as many EPs as we had 5 years ago.
Right. Okay. Why is that?
To be blunt, they've got more opportunities to do work elsewhere, and there aren't as many nationally. The system is not producing enough EPs. There's a very limited range of qualification placements for more EPs. That's something that needs to be addressed via the white paper, so that we've got a wider workforce that we can recruit from. The other factor is we are on the border with London authorities, who can pay significantly more because they are more generously funded per head SEN population than Essex is by a long way.
But that's our substantive workforce, so obviously we are mitigating that through the agency workforce.
Yeah. Just on the agency workforce, so you said you contracted last year an extra 900 assessments, and that was a sort of almost a struggle for them to recruit EPs themselves. So how confident are you that they will meet the contract this year, 1,900?
So basically what I said is they couldn't mobilise quickly enough, was my exact language, but they did mobilise at the end of the contract to deliver the full 900. So we had more assessments from the agency from April to July, the last 4 months of the contract, than we did for the first 4 months of the contract. So those EPs worked on the Essex contract. We were getting about 150 assessments per month at the end of the contract. We have just simply recommissioned at the level that we were getting from Liquid in July. So those EPs were working on the Essex contract, and they remain working on the Essex contract.
So you're confident that that figure will be reached?
So I've got actual figures from a deep dive we're doing from yesterday. I met with the member of our team who is doing the Liquid EP allocations. For Mid-Essex, for the 24-25 academic year, there were 209 allocations from Liquid to that team. There's been 143 already this academic year. So it's significant.
Thank you. One of the big things that I get time and time again, speaking with the SENCO that I work with, is that communication, again, is not satisfactory. And I would like to hear a bit more about the communication element that Ms Kershaw mentioned. It feels like quite often to me that schools feel there's a brick wall between the local authority and them, where they're having to chase up where an application is. Just wonder whether there's any way that might be addressed under the communication piece of work.
Catherine, can I bring you in?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think we are fortunate in Essex that we do have our inclusion partners, and that is a resource which is not statutory. So the SENCOs have that direct access to have the support from the inclusion partners, and they are available and responsive and should be very accessible for all the SENCOs. In terms of the SEND operations side of things, so where things are in assessment or a needs assessment request has come in, it is that situation where we are trying to deal with current cases coming in and a very large backlog with a team that is set up for kind of business as usual capacity. So communication is extremely challenging. We have done some work around kind of automated communications to keep people updated on where we are in the process. That's particularly to families rather than into SENCOs. Obviously, we communicate through our SENCO networks and our head teacher meetings around the challenges that we're facing. And so we would hope, therefore, that the SENCOs themselves would be able to communicate that to families as well. But we we're really clear, we met with some families earlier this week, that we do need to do more work in this space and come together collectively with Senkos, with families to see we haven't got any additional capacity, but what more can we do process-wise?
Okay.
Could I just come in there, Chairman, if I may? Certainly, absolutely understand what you're saying about Sanko's, Councillor Plough, but communication is one of the most common things, again, along with the emails I see, or communications that I see, and a lot of it could have been resolved by better communication with families, and that's what I'm focused on. A lot of the complaints could have been, if you like, headed off by better communication.
Thank you. Just a final comment to both the chairman and the panel. I think we've got sort of routine updates on this. It'd be great if in future updates we could perhaps have some graphs. I know that would just be useful, I think, for the committee to see that more visually. But thank you to the panel. I don't envy the task that you have.
Right, thank you, Councillor Plough. Councillor Loxton.
Thank you. 2 points, if I may. The first one, which has been raised when I've been talking to parents, is whether you could give a bit more detail about how the policy for tackling backlogs and for tackling new applications, to what extent is that done in date of application order? To what extent does that get varied, and why might that be? If you could give a little bit of understanding on that, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, bring Catherine in. So obviously when the performance got as low as it got to, which was 1%, it meant that we just had a backlog basically. So we just were literally working on the oldest first in order that we moved through as quickly as we could the parents that have been waiting the longest. Obviously, we did need to make improvements. So what we have done is we have ensured that any child that we identify as being vulnerable waiting for a needs assessment, when we make the decision on the needs assessment, we do look to ensure that their needs assessment is accelerated, because we appreciate they've got vulnerabilities. Where a child is, say, in a mainstream school, say maybe I don't know, year 3, they're settled, their school place is unlikely to change. We do track whether their needs change and the school is able to meet the need, but we do recognise that the child needs an education, health and care plan. Then obviously we will just process that as quickly as we possibly can. So what we're trying to do is make sure that those children who are vulnerable, who are out of school or have no social care, etc., who do require the plan to assist them back into education, we do look at those young people that the plan is needed, but we feel that the school is able to support, then unfortunately they are taking longer and they are processing. The backlog is managed from the oldest first, so we simply do take from the oldest every time an education psychology assessment becomes available.
Thank you. My second.
Can I just add to that? I'm not sure if somebody else. What I look at, because there's 2 competing priorities. One is the 20-week legislation timescale, and the other one obviously is the backlog. What I look at, and I've said this to the previous committee, is the overall wait times, because they do compete against each other. You can sort the 20 weeks, but the backlog's just going to get longer, or you look at the backlog and then you don't meet the 20-week deadline. But so when I have my monthly meeting, I have been asking to see the overall wait times and want to see those come down.
Sorry, there was one final point I should have said, sorry. Obviously, going back to the notion of whether the assessment can be done virtually or requires face-to-face assessment will also form part of the decision, because obviously the capacity that we have is with the virtual assessments.
Yes. I would also just say that really, I think, is the aspect of the communication that I'm currently really thinking needs to make sure we're very clear on. So it links to your question about Senkos. Our families and Senkos really communicating with us when a change of circumstance happens. So if a child becomes vulnerable or changes to circumstances around school attendance and so on, so that we can be absolutely sure that no children are waiting who are vulnerable.
Yes, I think that comes back to the general thing about communication.
Yeah, that's the priority.
That issue
absolutely.
around that. Thank you. My second point was about monitoring. To what extent do you have any view or confidence about the extent to which schools are actually delivering the HCPs as defined, and whether you have any metrics on that? You mentioned annual reviews earlier. Can you say a little bit about that? Because that's something that gets raised with me with people who work in schools, that do you really understand their capacity to actually deliver the defined plans?
It's a good point. Again, within the communications I have with parents, some of the cases is the school isn't meeting what is required in the EHCP. Of course, the school has either been, as I've said, they can meet the needs, but I agree with you. It is then further complication of everything's been agreed, and then the parent doesn't feel that the school is meeting the EHCP.
So when we issue a plan, obviously a parent could state a preference for the school that they want their child to go to. If the child is mainstream appropriate, we would hope it's the local school. It's not always. And obviously we consult the school before admission on the EHCP. So every school sees the child's EHCP before we agree the school place. So I'd hope that they are able to deliver what's in the EHCP, and they get the opportunity to feedback. If they feel they need more support, we will provide that at the time, and Catherine's referenced our inclusion partner team will help and facilitate that. So part of the level of funding is also linked to what the school may need to be able to implement the provision that's outlined within the EHCP. So there is a lot of consultation with the parent and with the school before the child arrives with their EHCP in that regard. If the child's needs change or the school feels that they're unable to continue to meet the need for whatever reason, then hopefully the annual review would pick that up, because the annual review is a review predominantly between the parent and the school. But if they feel that the plans need to be amended, then they will come into us for change and amendment, and sometimes we change the banding as a result of that. Sometimes we might agree to move the child to a different school if that's more appropriate at that point, and that's what the parent would like as well at that time. If the needs increase significantly and over a short period of time, the school can call an annual review earlier, so they don't have to wait for the year. They can call an annual review earlier. We do have our inclusion partner workforce, as Catherine has said, who do meet with schools termly, so we would want to work in partnership to ensure that they can meet the needs of their children with EHCPs and send support as well. So it is very much a two-way process, but we do require the school to also talk to us as well in terms of what's happening, to know what we can do. But there is always a response there. But there are enough, I think, checks and balances in the system, I would hope, in order that can happen. What I will say is, Ofsted do inspect the provision for children with SEND as part of the school education inspection framework, and over 90% of our schools are old language, forgive me, but are good or outstanding in the pre-24-25 inspection framework, and the majority of our schools achieved good above the board when the single word judgment was removed last academic year. So we've also got Ofsted telling us what's happening around the quality of the schools around SEND as well. So if there are individual issues, we would absolutely want them to be raised with us at the earliest opportunity.
But you don't have a proactive mechanism for measuring the delivery, the ability to delivery.
So, we do actually, but obviously the child is in the school and it is for the school to deliver the provision, and they do that on a day-to-day basis. We do have termly meetings with the school, so our inclusion partner, there's a named inclusion partner for every school in Essex, and they will have a strategic planning meeting once a term with the school, and really that's the opportunity as a minimum for the school to raise issues. If they need to do it more quickly, we would expect that to be done in real time. But yes, we do actually sit down on a termly basis with the school and have a strategic discussion about their children with the HCPs.
I can't help, I appreciate very much what you say and all the work you're doing. I can't help feeling there's a slight disconnect, and particularly around where a plan calls for one-to-one provision, one-to-one support, the extent to which schools are managing to deliver that one-to-one support. And I'm just slightly worried that if the Education Authority doesn't know that with any kind of metric, that everything else feels kind of secondary and remedial down the track in terms of Ofsted. So I do feel there's a sort of a disconnect there, which worries me slightly, though I do very much appreciate your capacity issues and your focus is on the 20-week issue. So I don't want to sound too negative. I appreciate that very much, but it does worry me that I hear about a kind of disconnect between what it says in plans and how successfully they're being delivered as defined in practice.
If I can just come to, sorry, Chairman, but again, when I took or had the honour of being given this position, I made it clear I do not run schools. We do not run schools. Yes, we are the Education Authority, but the changes that have been made, with academisation and autonomy of schools, rightly in most cases, means that it's not the Education Authority as it was sort of 15 years ago with those responsibilities. What I would say is, though, the schools, once the EHCP has been agreed, must comply with that EHCP. And I haven't seen any, as far as I'm aware, the parents are aware of what the school should offer. If that is not being delivered, then it's up to the parents to flag it up with the school. And some of it is staffing issues, and I get that. A personal support leaves and there's a gap before another personal support comes along. That seems to be the most common to me. But then they should, as they speak to the school, or speak to us. It's simple as that, and we will make sure we can that EHCP is delivered, because it should be, and that's the responsibility of the school once agreed for them to deliver that.
Do we have the capacity to measure the outcomes, every outcome in 15,000 education healthcare plans on a granular level? No.
No.
But I do need to say it is for the school to do that. As Councillor Paul said, we don't run schools. We trust the schools, once the child is admitted, to be able to meet need or to flag whether they are struggling to meet need. There is, they've got the SENCO, you've got the head teacher, you've got the governors. They should be monitoring what's happening with their pupil cohort as regularly as they can, and they have the ability to raise any issues directly with us. And the schools know. I mean, I meet with the head teachers frequently. Literally came from one of the quadrant meetings this morning. That they all know that if need be, they can come directly to me if they have got an issue, and they do. So that communication line is open. So I appreciate it feels like a disconnect, probably because it is, because day to day on the ground, it is the relationship between the family and the school, and we trust that to happen.
I'm going to move on. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, Mike and Wendy, between them, have asked all the questions that I had. The one thing I would say is, obviously, I'm not a member of this committee, and I only sub from time to time, and I think the last time I subbed on this subject, we were in the chamber and we were at 1%. So I would say it feels like we're in a very different place now than we were back then. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. I'd just like to make the observation that often conversations regarding provision for children with SEND concentrate on EHCPs. Understandably, in many cases, I'm incredibly sympathetic, as I'm sure everybody involved in education is, for families that are concerned about any delay or whilst they're waiting for an assessment or for an educational healthcare plan. Unfortunately, the conversation often has potential to divert attention away from the far wider issue of children who are in receipt of any level of need that doesn't meet the HCP level. And this is addressed by schools' commitment to the inclusion culture that has been described. Schools have wholeheartedly embraced the call to establishing that culture. And whilst I accept that some children do require very precise and specific need and support that would be addressed by an educational healthcare plan, in many cases, the greatest determining factor on a student being able to overcome barriers to accessing the curriculum and to flourish and thrive is not necessarily addressed by the educational healthcare plan. Rather, it would be best addressed by the school culture and by that child knowing that every single member of staff in the school community wants them in the school, is welcoming them in the school, and is absolutely committed to doing all they can to support that child to flourish and thrive. It's been noted that whilst SENCOs clearly in any school are very influential figures and important figures, the responsibility extends to every member of staff. We stress that all teachers are teachers of SEND, and my assessment would be that commitment, that philosophy and that approach is embraced by educators across the county. Adaptive teaching has been addressed, distinct from what we might used to have called differentiation, whereby teachers might have set children a different task. That's no longer the case. The approach is that teachers will adapt their teaching so that all children are able to access the task set and are able to access the curriculum and to progress at their own pace. And also teachers will, I know it's been stressed about high functioning children, schools do have a responsibility to address stretch and challenge to ensure that the highest attaining and highest functioning children equally are able to fully fulfil their potential. Schools know that what works for children with SEND works for every single child. So, you know, they're committed to that philosophy, they're committed to that approach. We do it for the right reasons. We do it because it's morally correct that we are helping the children who are most vulnerable. That's how a society is judged. That's how any school is judged. So school leaders, teachers, staff at every level will be committed to that first and foremost for the correct reasons. If there's any doubt about that, then as has been described, perhaps a more cynical motivation might be that schools are judged and rated and held accountable by Ofsted. And so if we're not doing it for the right reasons, which I will stress we absolutely are, we most certainly would be doing it for those reasons, because school leaders and every level of any organisation has a vested interest in demonstrating to Ofsted teams that children, all children, as I say, what works for SEND works for all, that all children are supported to fulfil their potential. So I hope I'm assuring representatives that we're fully sympathetic to families whose children are in need of an educational healthcare plan. And I hope I can just divert our attention a little bit to the wider issue of inclusion. My assessment and my assurance to the room is schools wholeheartedly embrace.
Yeah, and if I may, because that's a very, very useful, from my point of view, intervention, Mr. Coe, and highlights the cohort of the children with SEND support. Many thousands who don't have the HCP but are supported without the HCP. I don't know, Claire, whether you want to just add a little bit to what we do, or the amount of SEND support we do outside of those children who don't have the HCP.
Yeah, so SEND support, thank you very much as well, Tom, for that. And that's absolutely right, which is why we wanted to stress it is about inclusion. And it's all about meeting the needs of all children in respect of that. So schools identify children as SEND support, which basically means they need additional educational support within the school, but the school feels like they are able to provide that support, and certainly they go through the one planning process to be able to do that. So there's already a clear process that supports schools around where they are identifying that children, maybe because of additional needs, need further support to access their education. So there are about 20,000 children in Essex, if not more, who are classified as SEND support. Again, that's operational. It's for the school to determine those children as SEND support, and it's for the school to work through the one planning process to support those young people through their culture of inclusion, adaptive teaching, as Tom has outlined as well. If it gets to the point where the school feels that they have exhausted all that they are able to do in terms of providing support, is at that point that they can seek additional support through the education, health and care plan. So there should be a journey of support that child also receives as well.
Thank you very much.
May I just follow one final point that I'd like to make? It can be the case, accepting that an EHCP can be vital and can make a real material difference. It's not uncommon that when a family eventually receives an educational health care plan for their child, it's not entirely uncommon that what is recommended in that plan is vastly different from what a school is already offering. And I think sometimes there can be the perception, and I understand why this might arise, because it must be incredibly stressful and anxiety-inducing for families. There can be the perception for some that the educational healthcare plan will in effect be a magic wand, and it's on occasion not really different from what a school is already providing for that child.
Thank you. Councillor Guglielmi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the service for having delivered such an improvement in the last year or so. And I'd like to associate myself with Councillor Ball with the remarks he made at the beginning about it is very disappointing that the SEND reform has been postponed, put back, because it's obviously too difficult to deal with. I think we were both at the recent conference of the LGA when a government minister came along, presented half an hour of what the government's view was and plans and vision, and then she disappeared without taking any questions. It's very, very disappointing. And the National Audit Office in last October published a report to say that special educational needs system is financially unsustainable, and more authority are issuing a Section 114 notice because of the cost on SEND. And we've seen on the slide there, the high needs block by 29-30 will be £428 million deficits. I mean, these are astronomical numbers, and I'm really quite. It's hard to get your head around it, you know. Whilst at the same time, as you said, you know, behind each figure, each one of those applications is a child and a family that goes with it, and it is extremely difficult and complex area to deal with. And the reason the question was asked, why has this gone so bad? Well, there's a mixture of things. You know, it's a combination of everything, and I think Essex County Council response has been the best you could possibly do. Jasmine and I attended recently. We were invited to a Centre for Governance Scrutiny, and we did present the Tuscan Finnish Group's work that we did here. And there were remarks on that the improvement progress that was achieved was very significant given the circumstance. And the fact is that you've cleared a backlog, which was outstanding, which that was always your first aim to do. And I'm reassured that the plans you have going forward and the educational psychologist program that you've got and the response you've had, it's very reassuring. But as Ralph said, I think, you know, when you compete against an open market where those guys can go and earn a lot more than what they do on a local authority, you're up against it, aren't you? There's no question in there, just my remarks. But I have a question for, I don't know, for Claire or for Catherine maybe, or even Ralph. I don't know which one was going to have. I'm going on to meet a group called the Maze Group that operate in North Essex. And having read what they do, I think it's remarkable, really, what the services they offer. They only meet in the mornings, which sometimes if you're a working parent, it's going to be quite difficult, but I'm going to have that conversation with them. And I just like, is there many of those groups that operate across Essex? What I've read about them is absolutely incredible, so I'm looking forward to meeting them.
You'll enjoy it a lot. They are a great group, and Sue, who runs that organisation, is a really good asset for parents in North East Essex. There are other groups like Maze in other parts of the county, so I'm going to say a few of them. If I've missed anyone out, hopefully they won't be offended. Snap in South Essex are brilliant. The Essex Family Forum are brilliant. Families in Focus provide a different service. We've got lots of different organisations that work with parents packed in Harlow. So each quadrant has got someone. They're all unique. They're different, but they're similar. The similarity is that they're all absolutely passionate about supporting families, children and young people with SEND. So I would say to all the members of the committee, go and visit them, meet them and see what they do. And I'm sure they would be very happy to come and speak to you directly.
Well, the Essex Family Forum is county-wide, and we've met them, and they're great things, but I'll be interested to see. What support do they get any financial support from Essex County Council? These groups?
Some of them are commissioned to do very particular pieces of work, some through the Health Service, some through Essex County Council, but on the large part they are charitable organisations who rely upon grants, and that can be precarious because obviously they might rely upon, say, lottery funding, and then they reach the limit in terms of time when they can rely upon that. So they're always looking for additional sources of funding. There are any benefactors watching.
They offer courses for parents, tips.
They offer
the SEND system.
They offer all sorts of services. The parent drop-in, I think that probably one of the most valuable ones is the drop-ins. I've been to the Maze drop-ins across North East. You've got Families in Focus there. You've got the Essex Family Forum. You've got a range of different people talking directly to parents, and parents talking to parents, sharing their experiences and how they can support each other.
I'm looking for. I'm travelling from Louth to Mistley, 2.5 miles in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much, Edith. Thank you.
Okay, before I just bring this to a close, Councillor Paul, you mentioned the figure of an extra 7 million. I assume that that is the 4.2 and the 2.8 million that was shown in Claire's first line. Is that one-off funding, or is that being built into base budget?
That's one-off funding, for the agency EPs in the main, but there was other funding which you didn't mention, but I think that 7 million is one-off, isn't it?
So the majority of it is from reserves, so it is one-off funding. So it's a mixture of how we've had the additional funding. So we have an additional assistance plan that was funded 2.3 million. Then we have the education psychology contract. So we have the year-long contract, which was the initial contract. That's now been extended for one further year. So at the moment, the funding is only confirmed for this year. In terms of the funding, they are straddling, some of the funding is straddling multiple financial years. Some of it, a small amount, has been bedded into the MTRS system. We are doing a piece of work, I'm doing a piece of work with finance that will go to the corporate leadership team on looking at the system in a sustainable way, but in order to be as responsive as needed, then at this moment in time the response has come through funding from reserves, because the funding can come through much more quickly that way. But of course, obviously, the more we hopefully clear the backlog and get to the situation to more manageable, then we need to think about what is the overall long-term capacity and resource that we need to keep the system moving forward, whilst we wait for the reforms to come through in that regard. And as I think has been said, nationally only 46% of EHCPs are being issued within the statutory timeline. So this is a problem for every local area moving forward, and the national shortage of EPs. And we don't know what the white paper will say about what will be the requirements of a new system going forward.
Fine. So can we take it, Councillor Ball, that you are having interesting discussions with your colleagues in Cabinet about the need for that one-off funding to have a longer term life?
I would say the conversations are interesting, yeah.
We will follow those and we will give you great support.
Thank you.
Right, I've got one more. Councillor Vance, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Yeah, just picking up a little bit on the last point that you've just been talking about. Been listening with interest to the challenges and the difficulties that the team have to face going forward. And I commend them on the work that they're doing. But coming back to the section 9.1, page 48, just picking up on some of the things that's just been alluded to. It says here that the 2014 reforms didn't deliver what they were intended. And I come back to what Councillor Balls just said. I wonder if the team's got an opportunity to have some input into the new reforms so that we don't get a repeat of that kind of statement that the 2014 reforms did not deliver as they were intended. And secondly, for the team, it also says on that page that the National Audit Office reported a 58% increase in high needs funding. And we've been listening to committee presenting to us, yes, the challenges that they've got also. But I was a bit concerned and just interested to hear their view on the last part of that statement, which says, rising demand for EHCPs and widespread local authority deficits threaten the system's long-term viability. Would they like to just try to explain what that really means to us and what it means to Essex? Thank you.
So in terms of financial, the financial settlement, at the moment, the number of children with an education healthcare plan in Essex is growing on average about 11% a year, and the funding is increasing through DfE high needs block by 3% per year. So there's an obvious gap. The cost of provision is more expensive, particularly where we are reliant upon the independent market. It's soaring, and it's something that we understand the DfE and the government intend to address in the white paper. But if you get to the point where you have a 400 million plus accumulative deficit in the high needs block and the statutory override is removed, that sits on the council budget sheet, balance sheet. It will have not just an impact upon SEND within Essex, but the council as well.
Chairman, Ralph, because some of the colleagues that are new and may not understand statutory override, how the deficit's on the fact that you don't pay interest on that.
So at the moment, the deficit, the cumulative deficit within the high needs block is kept separate from the county council's deficit, not deficit, the county council's balance sheet. So it's been extended by the DfE for another couple of years, but at some point it will have to come back onto the balance sheet, and the point at which it does, if it's reached £400 million, you know there's going to be significant problem. That's why it's not just the SEND system that could be long-term unviable. It's going to impact upon county council funding across the country.
A problem for future unitaries.
Absolutely, and how will you divide that between the new configuration will also be something to be debated.
What I can also add, just by way of context, if it's helpful, because obviously that was the National Audit Office report. So under the previous government, there were two schemes that were introduced to support local authorities that were already in a deficit position, the Delivering Better Value scheme and the Safety Valve scheme, where basically under the Safety Valve, an agreement was done for further Department for Education investment in those local authorities with a view that changes are made in the deficit position in those local authorities reduces. I think it's fair to say that scheme has struggled to deliver as well. And I think for the committee's benefit, yes, we are at £30.7 million deficit or forecast at the end of this coming financial year. I would say that Kent County Council are over £100 million in deficit in their high needs block, and they are supported by the Safety Valve scheme. So it's a challenge for everybody, but I think in terms of where Essex is, we're slightly behind in terms of the significant risk. But that 428 is a do nothing, and hopefully you've heard today as well that particularly around our approach to supporting inclusion, we are trying to do as much as we can.
Thank you very much.
Can I just declare an interest? Because what you've just said, Send for All have just introduced a membership so they can raise funds for educational health. So they've got funds to support parents, and I joined last night for £12. So I don't know if that needs to be declared here, because it's something that I'm obviously going to support within my vision for the SEND children. So I may have to update it, but
I think it's always well to declare or over-declare than not declare.
Yeah.
Okay, so that will be noted.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can I thank members? I won't have any. Sorry, Councillor McCall.
Chairman, it's always open to this committee to pass a recommendation.
It is.
That we would like the funding that was referred to earlier to continue. Make that recommendation to the Cabinet.
Are you moving that?
I would like to, but I haven't got the precise words.
I think we've got the gist of it. That strong recommendation to Cabinet that is included in their budget considerations, I think, if I would put it that way. Is that seconded? Seconded. Is that agreed by colleagues?
Agreed.
Okay, that will be in the recommendations. I'm glad I raised that point at the end of the meeting. And I'm sure Councillor Ball will not be too unhappy that we've done that.
Reject the support, Chair.
Okay, can I thank members? I mean, really good session in terms of the breadth, and I hope that people watching this, and particularly parents and those who have come today, feel that we have given this a really good airing. Clearly, we will want to come back in the new year when we have, hopefully, have government's intentions for that to go on. Jasmine on my right will have picked up a number of issues. I'm not going into deep, but she won't have missed anything in terms of what we've done, for example, the drafts and commitment from Claire to a briefing paper, just to help us with some of the differentiation of educational psychologists and that sort of thing. So we have picked all that up. So can I thank you, Councillor Ball, for the time and your whole team for the time that you've given us, for the excellent way in which you tackled our questions. I think sort of the good and bad and the ugly all coming out. You've not tried to do that. And can I thank you very much? And with that, I will bring this issue to a close. We'll have a short 5-minute break whilst we change personnel and topics. And thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. You know what? We'll just go to the back.
Oh, and on screen, John, I should have said we have Councillor Marshall Vance on screen.
Hello, Marshall.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Are you feeling better, I hope?
I certainly am. It's just been a major operation, but yes, thank you very much.
Good.
Right, that should bring in flowers from all over Essex. Right. Okay, thank you. Welcome back to this meeting of the People and Families Strategy Scrutiny Committee. We now move to what was item 4, is now item 5, the corporate performance data. We welcome 2 cabinet members to this, Councillor Tony Ball, who's still with us after quite I thought very extremely good session, I have to say, Councillor Ball, this morning, and I hope you and your team felt it was worthwhile the time you spent with us. Councillor John Spence, who's the Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Integration, and they are supported by other colleagues who will no doubt introduce themselves as they make contributions. So this relates to corporate performance reporting. By way of introduction, at the Scrutiny Board meeting in July, it was proposed by Councillor Lewis and agreed by members to adopt a more thematic approach to reviewing corporate performance. This means that rather than reviewing the entire report at corporate scrutiny alone, each scrutiny committee will now focus on the areas most relevant to its remit. For example, this committee will look at performance measures linked to adult social care, children's services and education, etc. And cabinet members and executive directors responsible for those areas are present to support that discussion. You'll notice that this is the first time the data is being presented in this way, and it's designed to enable more focused and meaningful scrutiny. Corporate scrutiny will still maintain oversight of the full report and cross-cutting issues. I should also highlight that the performance framework itself has recently been updated. These changes reflect the revised Everyone's Essex strategy, approved in July, the new regulatory requirements and adjustments to national frameworks. While formal governance for these changes is expected shortly, we are reporting against the updated framework now to ensure that we have the most relevant information. So with that, members, we're being invited to review the performance data for this committee's remit, consider any issues or trends or raise questions directly with the cabinet members and executive directors present. So I will start by inviting, I don't know whether Councillor Spence or Councillor Ball have tossed a coin to see who might wish to say anything to start with, but I will.
Well, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Ball's just leant across and said, "You go first, I'm hoarse." But seriously, I hope this can work to the benefit of all parties. By definition, the councillors who are sitting on People and Family Scrutiny are more engaged than you necessarily would have been if you're in corporate scrutiny. I'm not making any aspersions. And will have a greater knowledge of this particular area due to previous sessions. And I do mean this, I hope we are thus able to engage with a good dialogue. I would just say in terms of the performance framework, particularly in adult and children's social care, I don't know about education, Tony, there are some of our annual targets which are not in our gift. Some of them are driven by national pieces. For instance, in adult social care, the one red there is number of people living at home independently after 91 days. Now, that is a national measure that we are required to achieve within the Better Care framework. However, the red is for the very good reason that we have a much more inclusive approach to reablement than other social care authorities necessarily do. The point I make is that the target is one which we are given, not one which we set. And there are other examples of that through the report.
Thank you, Councillor Spence. Councillor Ball? Chairman,
very briefly, because as Councillor Spence indicated, you probably heard enough from me in the previous part of this committee. But can I just agree with you and thank you? We found it very useful. I speak on behalf of us all, the previous session, and thank colleagues for their input into that. And just completely agree with Councillor Spence on the hopes going forward, but also recognising, and I'm just drawn to the good or outstanding schools information that we have in here, that's going to have to change because of the changes to the one-word judgments.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to begin by noting that following the presentation of the corporate performance report at last week's Corporate Policy and Scrutiny Committee, members raised several queries that fall within this committee's remit under this trial system. And it was agreed that these would be referred to us for clarification at today's meeting. In fact, I think there were 4 specifically that Councillor Henderson raised, and so I am going to raise them well, on behalf of all members, but to just assign them to the person who originally raised them. So the first is on elective home education, and it was, why is there no performance target set?
Chairman, I will hand over to officers. I mean, we don't have a target because it is a parental right to home educate if they wish to. So it's not for us to have a target one way or another. What concerns me about this is where parents feel they have no choice but to home educate, which is different to what I think Councillor Henderson is highlighting. But I would that parental choice I would defend. That is, and many families have done it for many years. But is there anything clear you want to add to that?
So what I would say is absolutely Councillor Ball is correct. What I would say to the committee is we don't proactively, we absolutely respect parents' right to electively home educate their child. We don't promote home education. We do absolutely want children to be in the education system, but we do absolutely respect their right to electively home educate in terms of a general target. We are doing a piece of work with the increase in numbers of children who are electively home educated around those linking the 2 topics together, around those with special educational needs. That is work that we are beginning to do, and certainly as that work continues, we can perhaps bring some updates back through to the committee. So there is something we are doing, particularly around those families that have decided to electively home educate their child where they might have an education, health and care plan. But that's work we are starting at this moment in time.
We will be giving a full written response to Councillor Henderson, I believe, and will we share that with this committee?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, it's quite difficult for me. I'm asking questions which were set, but of course I haven't got the context in which they were set and being able to follow up. So I'm just going to ask them forward and receive. The next I have is missing children. Is there a capacity or resource issue affecting this area?
So I just want to clarify, this is children missing education. This is not missing children. Nikki would take that one if it was for me in that regard. So there are periods of time where we are aware that we have a child who is living in Essex but hasn't yet enrolled at school or gone through the school admissions process, I should say. The number does move frequently, and it's never the same number of children. Generally, we try to keep the parameters of children missing education between a 500 and 600 range in respect of the children that we know that are not enrolled in school. The cause of this are really families moving into Essex and families moving out of Essex, and then delays for parents going through the school admissions process. So if it is helpful to the committee, what I can share with you is, as at today, we have 21 children listed as children missing education who have moved out of the Essex County Council area but have not yet applied for a school place, with a further 6 that are awaiting the outcome of an application or appeal for a school place. And what I can also say is we have 72 families who moved into Essex but haven't yet applied for a school place. So what we're doing is supporting those families to make sure that they do make an application for a school place, or indicate that actually they wish to electively home educate and take their right to electively home educate in that regard. So we do continually track these children in respect of where we are going, and we certainly do prioritise these children in respect of making sure that they have secured education provision in respect of where we are. In terms of it being linked to a capacity resource, no, that isn't a causation factor. We track as much as we can and support families to make those school admissions, either within the administrative area of Essex or if they've moved out as soon as possible to their new local authority area.
Thank you. The third issue that was raised from that corporate performance, EHCP performance. Members expressed concern and queried whether performance challenges are linked to resource or capacity constraints, including vacancies and recruitment difficulties.
Chairman, thank you. I believe that this we answered that in Mr. Jenkins' public question, and if it's okay with you, we'll send that what Mr. Holloway informed the committee of as a response to that.
I think that would be fine. Just wanted to make sure that I did pick up all the points that were raised. And the fourth one, family solutions. Members would like more detail on whether there were any resource pressures impacting delivery.
Thank you. So I'm.
Shall I start, Nikki?
Yes,
I'll bring you in.
Thank you, John.
I think we have a slight situation of apples and pears here, to be honest, Chairman. The Family Solutions offer has now been focused much more on more difficult families. The 84% target was very much based on a wider cohort. Now we're getting to focus on those situations where we can add greatest value. The 75% is deemed by the service to be a very good position. So we will be updating the target. We will still, of course, aim to get up into the 80s and 90s. It's just in this particular case, we're in a transition. Shaughnessy?
Thank you, Councillor Spence. So I'm pleased to be able to reassure councillors today that there isn't a resource issue within Family Solutions, and our Family Solutions service is fully staffed and it is appropriately funded. We recognise that 85% is a very aspirational target, and we also recognise that 75.2% is a good target, but as I say, we are aspirational. In fact, add that Family Solutions is our intensive family support service. It's a consensual service, so families have to agree for Family Solutions involvement. And if they don't want to work with us, then they can say no thank you. As Councillor Spence has said, what we are seeing are families struggling, issues becoming quite layered, and families actually needing a lot of support. There aren't any quick fixes to affect change, takes time as well. Also, we have to acknowledge that where consent is not necessary. And when we step those families back down again to the intensive early help space, sometimes they feel that they don't want to or don't require any further involvement from Family Solutions. Alongside of that, just being really transparent, we are reviewing and looking at our recording practices to make sure that they continue to be as robust as they need to be going forward.
Thank you. Okay, not being a member of the Corporate Policy Scrutiny Committee, I hope that we have faithfully carried out what we were asked to do by that committee at this meeting. Right, I will now, in that case, throw it open to committee members here for any questions they may have on the report. Who would like to begin? Councillor McCrory, did I see you? Yes?
Yes, indeed. Were we going to go through this presentation?
Oh, I do beg your pardon. Are we supposed to be doing the presentation first?
It's up to cabinet members how they want to proceed. If you want to talk through the slides.
Do you want to talk through the slides, or do we take them, because we have received these, haven't we? Or we take them as read?
Chairman, my assumption was that the questions would come out if colleagues had read the slides.
Fine, we take them as read. Okay, fine. I didn't want someone to have got a great presentation and then not feel they could say it. Right. Councillor McCrory.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for having the presentation in advance. Some points of detail, really. I'm just interested on page 21, the proportion of children experiencing 3 or more placements. I dare say you're going to say there's a whole raft of reasons why they have three different placements, and I guess in some cases it's probably have more than three, but perhaps you could just give us a flavour of the reasons why. And are they children who have been fostered, or are they in some sort of home, or is it just a mixture? I'd be interested to hear the background behind that.
Do you want to announce Councillor McCurry to each one as we go along?
Yes, I think we'll do that, yes.
And I'll again bring Nicky O'Shaughnessy in, but what I've learned here over the last 18 months is that it is true that some children will have complex and diverse needs, and the importance of getting a good match between the child and that person or those people who are caring for them is critical. Equally, so many of our placements are on an emergency basis, often on a Friday afternoon, where a family have simply reached the point that either the family can't cope or the child can't cope with the family, if you're with me. I really get troubled by those who believe the children. Some will have issues. Far more will be in situations where, for family reasons, or those caring for them can no longer cope for all sorts of reasons. So you're quite right, Councillor McCurry, there are different reasons. That often we have a situation where two placements happen very quickly after the other because the first is an emergency placement and meant on an interim basis. Nicky, you may wish to bring to life one or two of the situations where you'd have seen three placements in a year.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Spence. I mean, I think, as Councillor Spence has said, you know, the bedrock of stability for children in our care as their corporate parents is around the environment that they live in, a nurturing, loving, supportive environment. And I'm delighted to be able to say, as you know, that the majority of our children in care live in local internal foster care centres, foster homes with real families. What we know is that children can come into care in emergency circumstances, and that is when, as Councillor Spencer said, it's hard to match their needs, and we are looking at those opportunities to place them first and foremost. We will always look first to internal fostering as that first opportunity. And for some children, that is absolutely perfect and it works very well. For other children, it's not appropriate. And we have seen children move from a second placement and even a third placement, and usually it's an escalation. So children will start in internal fostering, but they may end up in external residential care, which, again, nobody wants that to happen, but for some children, it is the appropriate environment for them to be in. So we are improving in this area. We are better than our statistical neighbours now. It's an area that we give a great deal of attention to because stability for children care is so important. It's an area that we're going to continue to focus on as well. But we recognise there are areas of improvement, but again, we are not complacent.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory.
Thank you for that response. Moving on, page 22 of the presentation, the children looked after section. Obviously, pleased to see the way things are going and that you've got measures in place to find out what's behind the rise in the number of placements. But, I mean, can you just give us a feel at the moment of what is driving this and what can be done to get it at the root cause to prevent that rising placements and subsequent costs, of course?
Children will not be, and their families will not be immune from the pressures of society. And you are seeing this universally. I'll let Nicky again come in with some of the detail, but what we need to remember is we continue to be well below the national average in the children in care looked after children, which is a testimony to how well we do at keeping them with their families. Ultimately, you get to that position where the dam can't hold any longer, and so you do get more cases. But I just want to stress again, this, we are doing well, and we are not immune from the stresses. I was discussing with the Executive Director of Children's Services this week, how we can seek to contain this element across every area of children's services. We are seeing increased levels of demand, and it is actually very troubling, really, as to what is going on. And you're quite right, Councillor McCurry, there will again be different reasons. We're seeing far more children come into care at a very, very young age, under a year, because the family simply is not in a position to accept or to be able to nurture that newborn child. Just as we are seeing more situations where children are in teenage, sometimes falling away from school, sometimes in situations where often single parents, but not always, often single parents will no longer be able to cope, or indeed where there's relationship break-up at home. But Nikki?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the question as well. I think it's fair to say that we believe that children should be with their families, and it might not be their immediate parents at times, but their wider families as well. And we are certainly leaning into kinship opportunities as we go forward. But in reference to your particular question, we are seeing a cycle at the moment in mid of more children coming into care. When we've drilled into that, actually we're looking at large sibling groups. So it's not one child, two children, it's 3+ children. Linked to that, we're seeing long-term neglect cases becoming unsustainable, where we can't manage those neglect issues any longer within the home. And also what we're seeing, and particularly we're seeing this in Mid and South, is a number of babies coming into care. So these will be children that we know before they're born, who we have been working with, and sadly those parents, for whatever reason, haven't been able to achieve and sustain the changes that are required, as Councillor Spence said, to keep that baby safe. There is a backlog also in the court system, so we have more children in our system currently. There is a plan to actually address that within Essex, so we are hopeful that plan is successful, and we'll be working very closely with the judiciary to effect that plan. And whilst there has been a rise in children in care, as Councillor Spence said, and we're not complacent ever, but the mid rate of children in care per 10,000 is 36.4. It was 36.1, so it is still within an expected range. It is lower nationally and regionally as well in statistical neighbours. But as I said, we're not complacent about that. We are taking a lot of action in response to that. I can share some of those actions if you would find that helpful. Yeah. So we have regular placement review meetings where we are looking at the appropriateness of that child being in care, not just cost. Cost is a clear, important element, but actually the appropriateness. We are engaging our edge of care services. We are proactive in our interventions because we always see that change is possible. We believe that a leopard can change its spots. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing the job that we're doing, because people can change with the right support and the right interventions.
Could I just, Chairman, if I may, on that point about court delays judicially, as Ms O'Shaughnessy says, we've got a plan. She did say we're working with judiciary. The plan is not in our gift to implement. We have identified that there have been issues with a lack of court space over times. We have worked very hard to persuade the judiciary to appoint another judge. It is now a question of that judge's availability to help us work through the backlog. I would say in this public forum that the delays we have in some of these areas, particularly with children moving into adoption, are not good for the child, not good for the prospective parents. And I very much hope that the prioritisation can enable these really, really regrettable delays in achieving a stable environment to be resolved.
Thank you, John. Chris Martin, I think, wanted to.
Chair, I was just going to come
back to you.
I was going to come back to Councillor McCrory's point around at source. So I think the council's continued investment in things like family solutions and in the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service, for example. Those are early help, preventative, focused services, which I think are pretty unusual in terms of other local authorities. So not so much at source, but very close to those difficulties in families arising. We have a range of early help support options for families, which do not require them coming into kind of social care and then kind of all the way out, which are designed and positioned especially to help those families at the earliest possible point. So whilst not strictly at source in response to your question, I think we are unusual in terms of having that suite of preventative and early help measures, and that equally contributes to although there are a range of difficulties we're experiencing, a range of pressures, it would be much more difficult if we had the sustained investment and belief in those early help and preventative services that we have in the county.
Okay, good. Investment to save is always good. Just finally then, Chairman, on child protection plans, the bottom of page 23, so you picked out when they're longer than 2 years, so I take it that's bad if they're longer than 2 years, or no?
It doesn't.
The other way round?
Is that okay to come in, Councillor Spence? It doesn't have to be, no, not at all, because as I said earlier, to effect change takes time. And I think one of the things that we are very proud of within Essex Children and Family Services is that we don't give up on families. Because if families are not effecting the changes that are needed, the next stage is to go to court. And we will go to court and we will seek an order. But working with families within the realms of child protection enables more time to bring about the changes that are required. And that's why sometimes you see families on child protection plans or children on child protection plans for longer than 2 years. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. And I think if Paul Secker was here, he would say we monitor that very closely. It's under a constant review. Those plans need to be robust, smart and working. But we know that change is not achieved quickly in some areas.
Okay, I mean, it's not a criticism, I just want to understand whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Playle.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask the panel about, again, children in care, and on page, I think it's 23, it says brackets, non-separated migrant children. So does these data not include those, or am I just reading the wording of that differently? So the question I have is, what proportion do separated migrant children account for our children in care? Has this number risen over the last period? And do you feel, as a panel, that you get enough support from central government to look after separated migrant children?
It may be that thank you, Councillor, it may be that one of my colleagues can give you the exact numbers. If not, we'll send them to you. You will find that over the last period there has been a decline in the number of separated migrant children in the Essex piece. Again, it's not entirely in our control. They can be placed with us, and we have previously had advice from government that we might be about to get more, but as a percentage it would be down on where it was a year ago. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of costs, we do receive money from central government, but it rarely covers the full cost of the care for those separated migrant children. There's always a bit of pressure handling that cohort. As Councillor Spencer says, there's a decline in those numbers of separated migrant children coming into care.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. The panel expand a bit more on the use of unregistered placements for children, please.
I'm very happy to kick off on this, Councillor Reid, and we'll see which of the officers want to come in behind. Unregistered accommodation is not where we want to be. We are supposed to place young people and children in registered accommodation. Therefore, it becomes the last resort. It is typically an expensive resort because the providers know it's the last resort and we have nowhere else to go. It's a number that we aim to eliminate in the short term by the way we do things, in the long term by creating the capacity that we need. I'm very pleased to say that on the last report I had earlier this week, somebody may tell me it's changed, we had no children in unregistered accommodation. So you'll see at the time of this report in Q1 there were several. We've got it down now. We will aim to keep it down, but you cannot, you just can't, Councillor Reid, regulate the flow and there will be times when things happen all in a spurt and you are forced into that space. I want to give the committee absolute assurance this is our last resort. As I say, it's up earlier this week I was still 0. Nobody's telling me I'm wrong.
Okay, Councillor Reid. Any other questions?
I was just going to
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, if that's okay, Councillor Reid. I was just going to add, as Councillor Spence said, we give this matter huge attention and we take it extremely seriously. As an operational director, I did have children myself in North Essex in unregistered provision, and on a weekly basis, as a minimum, I was discussing each of those children because we do take it so seriously. We want every child to have an appropriate, loving, nurturing environment to live in. For those children, so we have none that are not in the process of being registered by Ofsted. Everything is in process, as Councillor Spence said. We are in a much better position, as you can see from the measures previously, but it's also volatile. And as Councillor Spence said, it could change quite easily. So we don't take our eye off this ball at all. It's very important.
Thank you for that reassurance. Any other comments or questions from any member of? No.
Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Vance, sorry. Your little yellow hand is hidden behind your red live signal. So, Councillor Vance.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you very much to the committee for presenting today. I'd like to just touch, if I may, on the section that you talk about children looked after. Recognise what you just said about the number of children, John, aged between 5 and 10, has now risen to around about another 30%. And you were talking about these placements causing, obviously pressures on you. You talk about also in the report about external fostering and residential placements. Could you tell us how that may help with your problems that you've got with these children remaining in service for longer? And second question was really around the area of, you had a budget workshop in September where you were talking about the pressures again that you were facing and looking at what things could be done to help alleviate some of those going forward in the future. Could you just allude to what findings you have got that may help to alleviate some of these pressures?
Thank you, Councillor Vance. I will kick off on this, but I know that my colleagues will be able to fill in a lot of the detail. What matters always is the quality of life of the child. The quality of their life today, tomorrow, and on the long term. And so one will always try to optimise the number of children staying at home with their immediate family or with the wider family, recognising, however, that it won't always be appropriate. We prefer internal fostering because we know the foster parents well, we have a relationship with them, we offer them training and guidance and support. There are those with whom we work who are providing fostering support at weekends, which enables those fostering during the week to have a break. But for the benefit of the young person, always they've got to be comfortable in both places. As I've travelled round meeting foster parents, it's been wonderful to understand how often the foster child becomes part of the wider family. I was talking to one mum who was saying how her birth son has now finished university and is off travelling around the world. When her foster son comes to stay with them 2 weekends a month, she finds out more about where her son is and what he's doing from the foster son than she can get out of the birth son herself. So there's a wonderful integration into place. We can't yet get enough capacity. It will be very impossible for any councillor in this authority not to have heard from me our ambitions to grow the number of foster parents in Essex. It is a far better solution than the ultimate piece of residential. And we only earlier this week had a session where we brought all cabinet members, all executive directors together to think about how we can address this challenge as a whole council issue. I would view it as a moral issue, Chairman. That's my personal piece, but it is certainly one which is critical for the quality of life of the child and the financial sustainability of this council and other councils which follow. But Councillor Vance, we've still not got enough capacity. We need to up it, I think, by about 30%, and then keep upping it, because sadly a lot of if you look at the profile of foster parents across the country, you will find that many are coming up to the age of retirement for them, which is not a formal retirement age. Bear in mind that many of our foster parents come into the service when they are becoming empty nesters or stepping back from full-time employment when they've got more capacity. So given the lack of that we can't quite keep up with the internal fostering need, we have the independent fosters, and they are very important, and I don't want to in any way criticise them. We prefer internal fostering because of the longevity of relationship and the training. Yes, of course, the independent sector is going to be more expensive. The primary driver for me, though, is the longevity of relationship with the foster parent. And it is after that that one then moves into the residential sector, and that may be appropriate for some young people, because as Nicky O'Shaughnessy reminds us, their behaviours are such that it is more secure for them, safer for them, better for their development, and better for the society as a whole. So that focus all the time on what is right for the child drives us, but we know that for the great majority it will be the fostering solution, or indeed for some that will become adoption, and often the route to adoption is from a foster parent who just wants to keep the child with them forever. Nicky, do you want to follow me on?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Spence. I think also, just to add to that, we have got the Family First Partnership Programme national reforms, which will give us the opportunity to also think about what else can we do to prevent children coming into the care system. And as Chris mentioned, we are leaning into lots of areas and extending areas, but we also see kinship care as an enabler, because there will always be children that will need to come into the care system. So what are the opportunities further that we can do about engaging family networks and community networks even more? And as you know, we have invested in our own residential establishment as well. Which it's very early days, but we see really positive opportunities with that as we go forward. But we are also, with the Family First Partnership Programme, becomes financial investment for us and how we spend that with our partners, because as Chris said, we can't do everything, and it is about how we support our partners to intervene appropriately and at the right time as well. And I'm leading on that programme on behalf of Children and Family Services.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vance?
Yes, can I come back on a couple? I did ask also what was explored at the placement workshop in September, what were the outcomes? And with regard to Councillor Spence, thank you very much for, the positive attitude that everyone's taking there. What are we and what can we do to help promote more fostering out there in the wider community?
I'm going to look to Ms O'Shaughnessy or Chris Martin for I don't have a note here of the specific outcomes of this placements workshop.
I can give Councillor Vance an idea. I think some of the things Councillor Vance have been mentioned, but my list of things was a stronger look at kinship. So sometimes we look at kinship arrangements too far into a child's journey into care. Maybe we should kind of think more radically and innovatively at an earlier point around kinship care. We've mentioned building our own in-house residential capacity. Part of that workshop was also focused around stronger relationships with the independent residential sector that operates within Essex. Across Essex, actually, there is enough residential care sufficiency for all our young people who require residential care. We need a stronger foothold in that market. So that's something that my commissioning team are leading. We have a refreshed foster care business case. We had a really successful business case, an initiative a few years back. We're looking to kind of refresh that, learn from that business case, learn from our existing foster carers, how we can kind of broaden out the foster care sufficiency. There's also something in there around using AI and some anticipatory data so that our prevention work can reach those families potentially in need at a much earlier point. And in terms of cost, a sharpening of our kind of procurement and commercial responses around actual costs of care.
In terms of your second point, Councillor Vance, about what can we really do to promote fostering, I'll say every single one of us in this room, councillor or non-councillor, can do something in this space. But I do just want to remind ourselves, fostering isn't just a single brand, a single flavour. Fostering takes many different forms. There are those who offer respite fostering. There are those who are focusing their work on very young children. Others who feel they're better equipped to work with teenagers. At the session I referred to on Monday, we heard from one of our newest form of foster parents, those who have stepped forward to become intensive foster parents, where they are knowingly taking on a greater share of their lives with the needs of this young person. I don't have permission to share the video that we showed on Monday. If it becomes appropriate at some point, I will ask that of the person who we filmed. This is an individual, a couple, who have said they will help us, and they are dealing with a young person who has come to them, with many dealings with the police and criminality, with many issues where, due to the things that have happened in that child's life hitherto, they have fallen into that worst of worlds. And this couple are working with that child. It is, and indeed, what he said to us, as he said to us, what can we do to help you carry on with this? He said, give us the certainty of care. Give us that ability to have the space that we need both in our lives and in our home, and we're actually giving them financial support to move from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom house. The business case, if you want to talk crudely in financial terms, is terrific. You have seen before the chart I've referred to in council. 7 children, young people, currently costing us over £1 million per annum. The next 50 in excess of £500,000, or 50 beyond that who would be £500,000 plus in annualised terms. If we can enable a youngster in residential accommodation at, let's just say, £16,000 a week, to live with a foster parent duly supported with all the support they need, and we are paying that individual far above our normal foster rates, that seems to me to be the sort of enterprising solution which is right for the child, right for the council. So what can we do, Councillor Vance? We can do so much in our personal lives. We can talk about the joy of fostering. We have masses of video material, much of which has been released to councillors before, showing foster parents talking about how enriching it is to undertake this activity. Around a third to a half of all councillors in Essex County Council are on partner or on district borough city councils. Of those 12, only 4 have so far signed up to being a fostering friendly employer, although they all committed to do so last December. I say this again, last December, in the meeting of leaders and chief executives, every district borough city council would apply to become a foster friendly employer with those fostering friendly practices to go. It's not enough just to subscribe to the title. You need to have the policies. Why should it be that an individual worker in a local authority in Essex gets more time off to be in the territorial army than they do to be a foster parent? So we can tell you which councils have signed up to be fostering friendly. Those of you who serve on those councils will be able to scrutinise how much they are actually doing, and those of you who are on councils that haven't subscribed will be able to promote the practice in your authority.
Thank you very much, John. Just a final point.
Councillor Vance, I could have gone on. Yes?
Sorry, just one sort of practical point. From someone raising an inquiry to possibly be a fosterer of some kind, what's the time frame from beginning to making the inquiry to someone actually taking, say, a child on board or taking a fostering person on board?
Now, that's an excellent question. Well, they've all been excellent questions, Councillor Vance, but I will come back. Can I just finish on where I was, though? So well beyond the authorities, we want to start working more with the employers of Essex in the private sector. We've been dealing with the NHS as well, of course. We want to work, Tony, you're promoting this. We recognise that teachers and people who are in the teaching and caring professions are often those that may feel that they've got the qualities who want to become foster parents. I'm reaching out to Councillor McKinley about us getting to some of the major employers of the county, so that across the raft our fostering recruitment campaigns leave no stone unturned. Nicky O'Shaughnessy will tell you that these timescales from moving from the very first gesture of interest to the time that they become foster parents is variable, but takes quite a long time. There are many steps. I would suggest, Councillor Vance, that there's two questions here. How long does it take now, and what are the rates of leakage? And secondly, how could we have the most optimally effective system? So from that very first moment, how do we grow the number of people who even show the slightly vestige of interest in it? How do we grow those whom we then retain to get to a point of having serious conversations? How do we grow the percentage we then retain to come to application? Because at the moment we have quite a big leakage from that initial piece down to the application. And then how can we optimise the application appraisal process? So Nicky O'Shaughnessy can give you the answer of where we are today. I'd want to share with the committee that I would very much hope we can work with the service to optimise both the lack of inappropriate leakage, where we lose somebody we really hope we can keep on board, but also get the timescales right. Nicky?
Thank you very much, Councillor Spence. Just to be very frank about it, there are many enthusiastic people that would like to be foster carer, and we are delighted that they would like to be. But the reality is, to be a foster carer is a highly skilled professional role. It is like training for a profession, whether that's social work, teaching. It's not something that happens overnight. But from that very first moment of interest, we want to grab that person and that family as quickly as possible. So following those inquiries quickly is very essential before people change their mind or move on to something else or think differently. But also, we also have to exclude people from that process. It's very inclusive to begin with. We want people to have the opportunity, but there's a very detailed assessment process that you complete within what's called a Form F assessment, which is very much about you, but not just you, because usually people aren't fostering on their own. They're fostering with their family, whether that's a partner, whether that's children under 18, adults who live in the home over 18, and also those communities that they have contact with. So we want to encourage as many people as possible. People don't come ready-made. There is a process, there's a huge amount of training that people have to get through and also pass that training. We can give you some averages outside of this meeting for the different component parts, because fostering is not just one entity. It's broken down from initial inquiries, as Councillor Spence said, to then a home visit, to then potentially starting with the Form E assessment, and then to look at what the training opportunities are if people pass through all of those things, including a detailed police check as well. So it's something that we want to encourage, but people don't come ready-made. People usually have to they will have to go through the training. As Councillor Spence said, we recruit well from schools. So support staff in schools have made excellent foster carers, but it's not just limited to that. And we are very open to anybody and having a conversation with anybody within, boundaries in terms of their interest in fostering. But if you did want some specific timescales, we could give you those outside of this meeting. I don't have those to hand today.
Thank you, Nicky. Interestingly, there was a time when social care workers were precluded from becoming foster parents. That's gone now. So, Councillor Vance, you asked us a question about how long, and we've given you very long answers, but not actually said. I think as a typical Nikki. There's no set time. There's no one answer, but typically nine months would feel the sort of time we're talking about to go from initial interest to approval.
Yes, 9 to 12 months, I would say, John.
Pity we can't introduce the same from conception to birth for parents training.
I'd never even thought of it, Councillor Buckland.
Councillor Giuliani.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Spence would be pleased to know that Tendring was one of the first to do the fostering friendly, one of the strong strategies that's been put in place. My question is to both you and Councillor Ball. There's a lot of greens there. Once post-LGR, it could turn not green. Will it be a difficult process to identify, because obviously there'll be, these are figures from all over the county, to split them all up and to identify and how to pass that information to the unitaries? What is the current thoughts about how to go about that particular task?
I suppose, if I may, John, I suppose there is a risk to everything here unless councils cooperate. I'm very much hoping that councils will cooperate. Now we're creating new municipal boundaries, but I think there is an opportunity with smaller councils than Essex, or perhaps a little bit more join up and working together across departments. That's not a criticism of where we are, but we know that Essex County Council is a big monster in some cases, if I can put it like that. So I look more on the positive side. Yes, there is a risk, and John, I'm sure, will highlight and has highlighted risks to disaggregation. But on the main, I'm positive that as long as councils cooperate, don't get too parochial, stuck in their own new municipal boundaries, that actually some of these could improve.
Can I just
the risks are, if I may, the risks are as great as our failure to do this. Yes, of course, as Councillor Ball says, there are risks. The last ministerial letter back in July laid heavy stress on unitary councils working across their boundaries to achieve the common good within the counties on which historically they've been placed. And I very much hope the new unitaries will do with that. Once we have geographic configuration in place, really good dialogue can begin. There will be some things that we would be suggesting to the unitary councils, because it's entirely up to them, that they might want to consider jointly commissioning because of the specialist nature of that activity. I think, for instance, of the mental health practitioners who go out doing the blue light work all over days, nights, weekends, where people need to be examined and potentially taken into protective custody, sectioned and so on. There are 45 of those across the county. I wonder how effective it could be if you ended up with 9 in each place. So if that were to be the model chosen. So I just, I think there will be some things that will be entirely up to the unitaries, but risk may be minimised, Councillor Glowry, if there is that preparedness to think in exceptional cases we would be best to do this together and to commission together.
Can I just ask, I mean, clearly we've got greens and reds across Essex. As the future configuration becomes clear, presumably there is a possibility that some places which are covered by the overall green at the moment may actually be red, and some that are covered by the overall red might be green. I'm not asking for the detail at the moment, but are you in the process, or do you have processes in mind for being able to break that down? Or is it just in some cases impossible to break that information down?
But I would think there'll be some cases where it's impossible. There's some cases where it's our standard management information. So where children's social services are currently organised on a quartile basis, we will, Helen Lincoln will obtain from her directorate the information on a quartile basis so that we know, and that means there's probably 2 or 3 district borough councils in each of those quarters, and the information is frequently available. So, of course, you're absolutely right. Individual areas may be green, overall red, and vice versa. It must be true.
Thank you. And Claire will come in some, but it obviously depends on what the outcome is, because we know, and I'm going to be a little bit critical of the 5. The 5 will give more challenges, I think, because of the way that the larger areas will come together against the more deprived or educationally less well-performing areas. It's not all about green and red, is it? But there's no doubt that the 5, I think, I'm just thinking of Basil and Thurrock in particular, would perhaps not be green in some areas of education where it is at the moment. But Claire?
Yeah, just to assure councillors, if I can talk on behalf of all my director colleagues and the executive directors. So the corporate performance report which you're looking at here is at a high level in terms of the day-to-day data that we all scrutinise as leaders across the council. We get that by district, we get that by quadrant, because we are configured by quadrant as well as by Essex, as well as by national. So we already have all of that rich data. So depending on the decision and the outcome of local government reorganisation, we could create shadow packs very quickly in terms of potentially what configuration of unitary authorities we're moving towards.
Thank you. That was the assurance I was looking for. Nikki?
And just to add to that, we are already having conversations with Thurrock and Southend Children's Services. As you know, one is good and one is outstanding, and Essex Children's Services is outstanding. That doesn't mean that there won't be challenges. There will be. What we know is that Essex Children's Services has less children in care per 10,000 of both Southend and Thurrock, and that is potentially a risk and a worry. We all have our different operating models because we are 3 sovereign organisations, and the idea of LGR, as we know, is that nothing should be worse. Things should be as good as, if not better. And on day one, certainly for Children's Services, we have to be safe and legal. So having those shadow arrangements, as Claire has alluded to, would be helpful in advance.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other members wanting to ask questions. Can I thank Councillor Spence and Councillor Ball for attending? Councillor Ball.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Hello.
Yes, Councillor Vance.
Sorry, if no other councillors are going to ask, I thank you for taking a second bite to the cherry. I just have 2 questions, if I may.
Choice, rather.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to just explore, if I may, the number of children that's been home educated. I know that there's about 4,600 children being educated at home, and you talk about that being nearly a 30% increase. We all know as parents, don't we? We want to send our children to the best schools, but is there any indicators as to why there is now a 30% increase in home education for children? And my second question, I may as well throw it in so you've got them both at the time. And please excuse me for my ignorance, but you talk also about 2-year child protection plans, and you've still got, I think it was several hundred children, 680 children on those plans. I'm sorry, I don't understand why a child protection plan is put in place. So could you just enlighten me, please?
You want to do the first one? Yeah, do you want to know the reasons?
Yes, so we have, as we have with every part of the education system, seen an increase in all kinds of areas post the pandemic, including families exercising their right to electively home educate. Obviously, some families for the first time experienced remote education at home during the school lockdown periods in that regard. I don't have the specific details to hand. There are multiple reasons why families decide to electively home educate. The majority of families do decide to electively home educate for their own principled reasons. They want to electively home educate their child in that regard. Some families do decide to home educate because they have become dissatisfied with their child's school for a number of reasons. We do track that, and we do talk with the schools as well. So we do have the data broken down into more detail. But the majority of families, it is because they want to electively home educate their child. But as I said earlier, there is a growing cohort within that number of children who have an education, health and care plan that we want to review in more detail as well. But I'm happy to furnish the specific data in writing.
Thank you, Claire.
Pass to Nicky O'Shaughnessy, Chairman, for the protection orders.
Thank you very much. So a child protection plan is something that usually comes out of what is called a Section 47 Child Protection Inquiry, which is part of the Children Act of 1989. So it's a very clear legislative process. What happens is, if there are significant concerns about children in terms of their ability to be safely cared for by their parents, the first stage we usually have is to convene a child protection plan. That is called an initial child protection plan, which is multi-agency. We invite parents to be present as well. We try to do that in a very strengths-based approach because actually parents are very frightened of us and that we will remove their children. And it's something that we have to acknowledge. Even though we don't have the immediate power in the same way the police does, we do have the power to go to court to ask the court to agree to an order to remove their child. So we're very conscious of that power differential. But a child protection plan is, a child is made subject to a child protection plan when we have serious concerns that we cannot resolve through a consensual way of working under Section 17 of the Children Act, which is that consensual way of working. So we would put together with the family a child protection plan which identifies areas of concern and areas that we would expect the family to work on to improve those situations. One area, for example, would be neglect, home conditions being of not a good enough standard. We all have different ideas about parenting and what good enough parenting is. I'd certainly, we're not saying it's got to be 5-star, it's about good enough parenting. So it's not about making it unattainable for parents as well. But the child protection plan indicates our level of concern regarding that family, those parents' ability to care for those children safely and appropriately. We would have those child protection plans reviewed on a regular basis through a core group meeting. It could be as regularly as monthly. If we've got more concerns, it could be even more regularly. And that would be with the multi-agency partners. And then we would have a formal child protection meeting where partners come back together with the parents. It's independently facilitated and chaired to say, has there been any improvements? We would hope that there have. But if there haven't, then we have to think about what else can we do? Is this plan still appropriate? If it is, we'll continue, we'll make adjustments to it. If there have been significant improvements, we consider, can we step that plan down to a child in need? And if there hasn't, are there other measures that we need to take? Do we need to go into court? Do we need to trigger what's called the public law outline, which is linked to pre-proceedings? Again, another level of concern before we would go into court to issue proceedings. Does that help? Is that
Yes, I'm sure that does. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I am going to draw this item to a close. Councillor Spence, Councillor Ball, that's it. Thank you very much for attending, and your colleagues. Feel free to leave if you wish, or you can stay if you want. I'm sure we've got other things to do. And we will just pause a couple of minutes. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Yep.
I'm going to leave before Councillor Vance puts his hand up.
I'll let you know how to get on.
Item 6, the work programme. Jasmine, do you want to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So just for members to know the work programme as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. And suggestions if they have items they wish to be added.
Any happy to accept the work programme as is? We talked about the fact that we may need to send one around depending on when the government does or does not do anything. Are you happy?
Chairman, we got an informal in January. I think we got a meeting to review what we've got on that programme.
Yes, yes.
I think it's becoming quite urgent because
fine.
It's an awful lot on the work programme. We're not going to get it all done.
No, absolutely. We will need to prioritise. Okay. So we'll leave it as it is then for now. Thank you. The date of the next meeting is the 11th of December at 10:30 here in Committee Room 1. I have no urgent business and there's no exempt business. So with that, I will
Can I ask
declare...
a question?
I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Stamp.
Could I actually ask members in an open, is this the format that the committee's going to go forward? Because I think we have
I'm
those...
just going to cover that when we finish this meeting and give an opportunity. So without any more, I will officially declare the meeting closed at 14:37.
Yep.
1:37.
1:37, sorry, 15:37, I'm in a different time zone. No, it's not 15:37. 13:37. Come on, 2 hours ahead.